Chapter 10:18. Come out. A loud roar shook the entire valley. Yin Nuoxing's aura suddenly became fierce. 10 types of elemental energy surged violently around his body. His eyes were cold as he pointed the Netheruan sword at a protrusion not far away from him. The air was silent for a while. Yin Nuoxing narrowed his eyes. After a long while, he still didn't see any movement. He couldn't help but lift his foot and walk over. However, before he could take 2 steps, a white flag was raised weakly from behind the hill. It even waved. Yin Nuoxing. Was this a sign of surrender? He couldn't sense any overly powerful energy. After thinking for a while, he let go of the Netheruan sword and let it float beside him. He said softly, "This is the resting place of my best friend. I don't want to use force. Come out. I won't hurt you." Behind the hill, the white flag retracted. A moment later, a pair of trembling children poked their little heads out from behind the hill. Their small silver eyes looked timidly in Yin Nuoxing's direction. They were 2 girls about 10 years old. They wore silver-blue robes with a faint metallic luster. Their attire was a little strange. Their silver-blue hair was astonishingly long, but it didn't seem to have been taken care of. It extended all the way to the ground. There were some grass roots and a few petals of flowers in their long hair. Their delicate little faces were as white as jade. They were very beautiful. Their small silver eyes were gray, and there were no eyeballs. However, he could sense an astonishing amount of spiritual qi and dense, immortal qi from them. He could even see at a glance that there was a faint amount of immortal qi in the souls of these 2 children. It was the same as Little Purple Soul's soul, but it wasn't as pure as Little Purple Soul's soul. Little Purple Soul's soul was almost an immortal soul. The 2 little girls crouched timidly behind the hill. Yin Nuoxing frowned. These 2 children gave him a very strange feeling. It was even a little familiar. This feeling was definitely not normal. "You? Whose children are you? Why are you here?" Yin Nuoxing didn't understand. With a calm expression on his face, he lifted his feet and walked towards the 2 of them. He could see that the souls of the 2 little girls were very young. They weren't the transformations of some old monster. His soul also quickly spread out in the void, but he couldn't sense the existence of any person within 1,000 miles. When the 2 girls saw him walk over, they were slightly shocked. One of them was so frightened that she screamed and waved her hand at Yin Nuoxing. "You, don't come over. Wah, busy." As the little girl waved her hand, a huge silver-blue arc of light suddenly flew toward Yin Nuoxing. In an instant, it arrived in front of Yin Nuoxing in an inconceivable way. Yin Nuoxing was stunned. The silver-blue arc of light wasn't very fast. However, it seemed to have the ability to shrink the distance. In the blink of an eye, it appeared in front of him. Moreover, its attack power was quite shocking. If someone below the demigod level was caught off guard by this sudden attack, they would probably die on the spot. However, this energy wasn't enough to pose a threat to him. With a light snap of his fingers, the silver-blue arc of light suddenly distorted. Then, it shattered into thousands of pieces and gradually dissipated in the air. He stretched out his slender ears and 2 fingers and pinched one of the pieces that was about to dissipate. In just a moment, the piece disappeared. However, his expression changed. The power of space. These 2 little girls didn't seem to have started cultivating. They didn't even have the slightest bit of energy aura on them. How could they launch an ultra-concentrated attack of space with a wave of their hand? After the little girl launched the attack, she fell to the ground in slight fear. Her gray eyes trembled as she looked at him. The other girl, who appeared to be calmer, slapped the first girl's head. She reprimanded in a soft and tender voice, "You idiot. What if you hurt Big Sister's place of eternal rest?" "Woo, woo, woo. But that guy is so scary." The little girl held her head and muttered with a bitter expression. "Big Sister." The muttering of the 2 little girls naturally didn't escape Yin Nuoxing's ears. When he heard the names that he obviously cared about, he narrowed his eyes. Big Sister, power of space, place of eternal rest. The situation seemed to have become strange. The 2 little girls' eyes and eyebrows were very similar. There wasn't much difference between their thin faces. They seemed to be sisters. Yin Nuashing had a guess. He narrowed his eyes and said in a faint voice, "You know Shi Xian? Who are you to her?" "You know, big sister?" The calmer little girl stood in front of the timid little girl and pretended to be calm as she looked at Yin Nuashing. Her little body was clearly trembling from fear, but she still acted like she was protecting her child. Yin Nuashing couldn't help but guess that she might be her elder sister. "Big sister, I've known Shi Xian for hundreds of thousands of years, but I've never heard of her having sisters. Moreover, I buried her here myself 77 years ago. You say you're sisters? Unless—" Yin Nuashing said the last two words very softly. He suddenly stopped and stared at the two little girls with shining eyes. Unless they were both creatures born from space. He took a closer look and felt that these two little girls were somewhat similar to Shi Xian, just like how she looked when she was young. However, he had never actually seen how she looked like when she was young. He only had a feeling that this was probably the case. If this was the case, there should be some kind of closer relationship between them and Shi Xian. The bold little girl couldn't help but be stunned when she heard this. She took a deep breath and mustered up her courage to look at Yin Nuashing. She said softly, "Our Lord Quartermoon? Oh, you know me?" Yin Nuashing looked at her in surprise. The little girl nodded. Big sister Shi Xian said that if there was anyone who still missed her and would come here, it would only be an idiot named Quartermoon. Yin Nuashing's heart trembled. His figure flashed, and he appeared in front of the little girl. He squatted down and pressed his hands on her shoulders. He said in a deep voice, "You said that Shi Xian said that?" The little girl was shocked by his sudden action. She was so shocked that she wanted to retreat. However, she couldn't because her shoulders were pressed down. Her beautiful eyebrows furrowed slightly. Yin Nuashing's eyes widened, and he stared at her. When he saw her in pain, he hesitated for a moment and released his hands. He said in a deep voice, "Shi Xian is still alive? Where is she?" The timid little girl hurriedly pulled her sister back a few steps. She said in a trembling voice, "See, big sister Shi Xian has been dead forever since 10 years ago." Yin Nuashing opened his mouth in shock. His hands were trembling, and he didn't have the strength to make any sound. This perfect timing, this damn timing. Life is really full of drama. However, why was it 10 years? Shi Xian had already been dead for 77 eras. During the ancient era, he would occasionally come here to pay his respects to some idiot who was sleeping here. If she was still alive, why didn't she say anything to him at that time? When he returned, he was already a heavenly god. Although he hadn't dealt with the matter of the origin life, he could still try. A heavenly god could see through the truth of the world and was above almost all the rules. It was merely outside of the rules. He should be able to find a way to revive her. He should be able to. The life in our space. After being destroyed by the rules of the world once, it's equivalent to dying according to the rules. Our consciousness will return to the original place, and we will no longer be able to communicate with the real world. The bold little girl softly answered Yin Nuashing's question. After big sister Shi Xian died, her consciousness has always been hidden in the space. She knows every time you come to see her. She wants to break free, but she can't. Big sister is already dead, according to the rules. Only we can communicate with her. Yin Nuashing fell silent and sat on the ground. He couldn't even comfort himself. He tilted his head and looked at the tomb not far behind him. There was some pain in his eyes. He scratched his messy long hair and couldn't help but sigh. His heart was in a mess. Is she all right?" The little girl was startled. If you're asking about big sister Shi Xian's consciousness in the concept of space, she has already completely disappeared. However, at the last moment, she said that she missed you very much and missed the time when she went out to play with you. She asked you not to blame yourself. In the end, it was her own choice. Why did it happen 10 years ago? Yin Nuashing didn't understand. After 3 great reincarnations, that little bit of consciousness could withstand the power of the void reversal. Could it be that the God realm wasn't affected at all because it was protected by the pillar of creation? After being destroyed by the laws of heaven and earth, it should have disappeared very quickly. Big sister Shi Xian was able to hold on for so long because of you. However, Big sister Shi Xian had waited for too long, and her consciousness was getting weaker and weaker. 10 years ago, the little girl lowered her head, and her silver eyes were a little dim. Our consciousness was born 1,000 years ago. It should have taken a very, very long time for a chaotic consciousness to appear in the real world. I know that Shi Xian helped you. I've heard her talk about this before. Yin Nuashing sighed. Origin life forms of the same kind could help each other. It would have been fine if she was in a normal state, but Shi Xian was already so weak that she was about to disappear. If she helped these two little fellows and ended the chaotic period of her consciousness prematurely, she would become even weaker and her consciousness would collapse. What a reckless fool. This was also why these two little fellows were so similar to her. They had the remnants of her fire energy in them. No wonder he felt a sense of familiarity with them. They were almost her projections, but they weren't completely the same. We've always heard Big Sister Shi Xian talk about the past. 10 years ago, when Big Sister was about to disappear, we wanted to hold her back, but we couldn't. Big Sister Shi. The timid little girl burst into tears as she spoke. The other little girl hurriedly comforted her, but her eyes were also red. Did she give up? She waited for too long. Because I'm not coming anymore, and her only hope is gone. Yin Nuashing raised his head, and his colorful eyes were red. He bit his lips tightly and didn't dare to breathe. He didn't let his tears fall. She must have been very desperate during those 70 years, but he had no choice. He was chased around the 8 primordial realms and forgot everything. He was lost. Perhaps this was the regret he couldn't erase in this life. Time had taken away everything, but it couldn't heal the wound in his heart. In a trance, he seemed to see the girl with long silver blue hair teasing him with her absolute control over space. She also liked to hide at the side and watch him suffer. She suddenly barged into his life and refused to leave, just like the naked girl. At that time, the two of them often bickered with each other. But on that day, she thought she was right and followed him out. She thought she was right and sacrificed herself, and suddenly left his side. That was his fault. But no one could punish him. What could he do? It seemed that he couldn't do anything. In silence, Yin Nuashing closed his eyes for a while. When he opened them again, a ray of red and black light flashed in his eyes. It was filled with a madness that couldn't be suppressed and could make the world tremble. All the sadness and sorrow sank into the bottom of his heart. He let out a harsh breath. He was powerless to do anything about what had happened in the past. But in this life, he didn't want to have any regrets. He didn't want anything beyond his control to happen in this life. He only wanted a perfect ending. What do you plan to do? Yin Nuashing stood up and squatted down again. He looked at the two little guys who were still sobbing, and a complicated light flashed in his eyes. Are you going to continue staying here, or do you have other plans? I don't know. The little girl who seemed to be the elder sister lowered her head and muttered. She shook her head. They didn't have any special plans. They matured in advance in a daze. They broke away from the cradle of space and appeared in the real world. They didn't know what to do, and they didn't know what to do. They just waited here day by day. Yin Nuashing also felt a headache coming on. After about 70 years, he didn't come back here. He didn't expect that the last wish of his old friend had disappeared, but there were 2 more little girls. Moreover, these 2 little girls looked a little like him. It was impossible to leave them alone. But if he wanted to take care of them, how should he take care of them? Should he bring them back and raise them? If he really did that, he would really become a professional stay-at-home dad. How many children had he raised in the past 20 years? Now all of them had grown up into big girls. Oh, there was still one little one who hadn't grown up at all. The elder sister's eyes flickered. She lowered her head and looked at the ground. She recalled that when they were talking to Shi Xian in the concept space, Shi Xian had said that her only regret was that she didn't get to see him walk to the throne of stars that belonged to him. She had been looking forward to it for a long time, but she didn't expect that she would fall down first. She didn't get to see the moment when he ascended the throne of stars, but she got to see the moment when he returned with the entire galaxy. Sister Shi Xian, do you like that quarter moon lord? Pfft. Huh. Do I like him? I don't know either. After all, he was the first person I met in the modern realm. He seemed to be in a daze, sitting in the forest all day long and staring blankly at the sun as if he didn't need to do anything. One day, he suddenly left. I was so excited that I chased after him. Now that I think about it, I unknowingly followed him for hundreds of thousands of years and then waited for dozens of years. Every time I saw him again, I felt that I could still hold on for a little longer. Just like in the past, I would stare blankly at him without thinking about anything else for an entire day. Occasionally, I would think that it would be nice to continue like this. Perhaps this is what love is. I'm not too sure either. The little girl's consciousness fell silent. Who? Who told him to look like that? That look of his is quite attractive to many girls. At first, I wanted to play with him for a year or two before leaving, but later on, I felt that he had a good personality. He was stupid, dull, and useless. Gradually, I couldn't bear to leave him. That guy didn't come for such a long time, and I was very sad. I thought that he had finally forgotten about me, but my sense of him had completely disappeared. He was no longer in the divine realm, and the last trace of his presence in the divine realm had also completely disappeared. It was completely annihilated, just like how he watched me die all those years ago. I also watched that trace of his presence gradually disappear. He seemed to have died a long time ago, and that was something that happened a long time ago. He should have died even earlier than that, and the remnants of his energy would only disappear after a long time. At first, I also thought that I might as well go with him. At least I would have a companion on the road, but that guy seemed to be able to come back. So I kept waiting. I just wanted to see him again. What an idiot. He actually made me wait for so many years, and when I finally sensed his presence in the divine realm again, he didn't come back. Idiot, idiot, idiot. You should just die from your stupidity. The little girl shook her head helplessly. Her sister was getting more and more confused. You could say that one side ruined a lifetime. How could there be a lifetime for an origin life form? Well, that's it. My ill-fated relationship with that guy had a simple beginning and a simple end. That guy's still feeling bad about it. When you go out and see him one day, just tell him about it. The only regret I have is that I couldn't be by his side and watch him reach the peak of the stars. It's a little bit of a pity. At first glance, I knew that guy was someone who would do great things. Idiot. This time it's really goodbye, little idiot. Her sister's voice gradually weakened. The little girl was at a loss. She felt a large amount of information that she had never felt before enter her consciousness. Her knowledge of the world rapidly spread and expanded in her mind. In an instant, she understood many, many things. In an instant, she understood what she had lost. Most of everything they had was inherited from Sister Xixian. Without her, their descent into the world would have been delayed for a very, very long time. So long that it was almost eternal. They had inherited her looks and even her soul, but they did not have her memories. But that was not a problem. They were just her inheritors. That was why she said that. Please let us inherit Sister Xixian's last wish. Yin Nuoxing was stunned. Last wish? What was Xixian's last wish? He really did not know. That girl had never said anything like that to him. The little girl's sister put her hands together and raised her head. Her small silver eyes stared straight at him. She softly said, "Please let us stay by your side. In Sister Xixian's place, we will witness the day you ascend the starry sky throne." Yin Nuoxing. Chapter 1019. Yin Nuoxing had mixed feelings as he flew in the sky. He scratched his head in confusion. He had taken a detour to Xixian's resting place to reminisce about his old friend who did not make it to the end. He did not expect to bring back two little brats, and these two little brats were somehow related to her. In an instant, his memory uncontrollably flew back to that era, to the time when he first met her. He recalled everything that had happened over the past hundreds of thousands of years. He shook his head and threw the past to the back of his mind. He rarely immersed himself in the past, but every time he did, it took him a lot of effort to get out of his memories. In that case, he might as well not think too much about the past. He had already stuffed the two little brats into his spiritual world. Little Purple Soul and She were having fun with the two little brats. The two little brats did not seem to be worried about leaving their old home. In fact, they were having a good time. Yin Nuashing felt mentally and physically exhausted when he saw the little brats wreaking havoc in his spiritual world. It was one thing to look at the mansion built by the Sea of Fire, but there was also a castle and a great wall next to it. The little brats were sitting in the Sea of Fire, catching the flames and molding them into all kinds of things as if they were playing with mud. Oh my God, this is my spiritual world. Can you stop wreaking havoc? Yin Nuashing was dumbfounded. This place had turned into a sculpture hall. What was up with that giant dragon made of flames? The little brats are having fun. Don't make a fuss, replied Violet Soul. Violet Knight replied nonchalantly, causing him to choke on his words. But seeing that little Violet Soul and the Space Gemini were having so much fun, he thought about it and didn't say anything. He sighed and let them have fun. It's not like they'll break anything. Wait, Xiaoxi, why are you joining them too? When Yun Nuashing saw that Yishi was also playing, she finally couldn't help it. Although this girl looked to be only 11 or 12 years old, she was still a mature adult who had lived for hundreds of thousands of years and had even died twice. Now, she was participating in a little game of three little girls. Yishi held the flame sculpture in her hand, her wine-red eyes blinking. She glanced at him and said, "I'm bored. Brother Nuo doesn't come in to play with us." Yin Nuashing smiled bitterly and pulled her hair, not knowing what to say. Ziyi lay lazily on the bed. Mei Mao glanced at him and said lazily, "The two children don't have names yet. Are you going to name them, or should I?" Yin Nuashing scratched her head. Before she could say anything, Ziyi continued, "I've already thought about it. The elder sister will be called Shi Yi, and the younger sister will be called Shi Yin." Yin Nuashing almost couldn't catch her breath. The names you came up with seem to have ulterior motives. Do you want to say something? These names were too obvious. There was a yin in each word, so it was probably referring to him. However, he didn't have any objections. He just wanted to complain that the person who knew Shi Xian was actually Quarter Moon, himself. At the beginning, he said that Quarter Moon was Quarter Moon, and Yin Nuashing was Yin Nuashing. Now he was Yin Nuashing. Slowly, the two identities overlapped. Those memories kept echoing in his mind, and he couldn't turn a deaf ear to them. He always inadvertently thought of himself as Quarter Moon. However, there was nothing wrong with that, right? She's such a good girl, but you ruined her life. She even jumped out to take a bullet for you. Ahem, she blocked a huge battle for you. Just based on this, do you dare say that you don't owe her anything? Ziyi narrowed his eyes and looked at him with a half-smile. If it weren't for Shi Xian, he might have died first in that battle, and there wouldn't have been any heavenly god of primal chaos after that. Yin Nuashing fell silent. Then she sighed. "Of course I know that I owe her." Before she could finish, Ziyi interrupted her. She waved her hand and said calmly, "It's fine as long as you know. That's all. We'll settle on these two names." She opened her mouth and sighed. Then she nodded helplessly. "Shi Yi, Shi Yin. Fine, we'll settle on these two names." Although he couldn't think of any particularly good names, these two names weren't bad either. "By the way, those two girls also like these names," Ziyi said calmly. Yin Nuashing. "So you're just acting first and reporting later? You're just informing me in passing? That's pretty smart." Ziyi nodded. Yin Nuashing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In the end, he had nothing to do with this from the beginning to the end. He raised his head and looked at the girls who were having a good time. Then, he shook his head helplessly and told Lon Exer to take care of his sisters. Then, he slipped out of the spiritual world. Yin Nuashing sighed in distress. He felt that this habit of his had been acting up a little too frequently recently. It was probably because the more naughty kids in his spiritual world, the more times he sighed. Sighing really made him grow old. In just a short conversation, he felt that his mentality had aged by a few decades. Because Z herself was a super naughty kid. Oh, it wasn't quite right to call her a naughty kid. No matter what, she was at least a few decades old. Anyway, that was what it meant. Every time he talked to her, he would feel exhausted. Yin Nuashing looked to the end of the horizon. The pillars of creation were still standing firmly on the ground. He narrowed his eyes slightly. Those pillars of creation had been out for a while now. He was a part of the control center, so he could sense the activity of the pillars of creation. The strength of the pillars of creation seemed to be gradually increasing. In other words, the world fragment hanging above his head was determined to be more powerful, and its threat level had increased. It's really troublesome everywhere. Yin Nuashing rubbed his forehead with a headache and sighed again. He didn't have enough power at the moment. After Navira was crippled by the void mist, he began to pay attention to the world fragment outside the sky. Navira came into contact with the void mist that was one level higher than the void mist, so the world fragment's energy was one level lower than the void mist. He should be able to deal with it. However, the power he could use was probably only at the level of a god emperor. It was hard to say whether he should deal with it or protect himself when encountering a problem of the world scale. A god emperor didn't have the power to deal with this kind of problem and ensure that he wouldn't be injured. A god emperor might seem powerful to others, but to him, they were just a fragile life form that was even more fragile than the world itself. Rubbing his fingers, Yin Nuashing sighed again. I can only wait and see when Sister Shui and the others will gather the materials for me. I'll go and find Luli. In fact, if it was really necessary, he could go and find Luli now. However, he had once angered her. If she found out that he had recovered his memory and that he was pitifully weak now, she would probably beat him up. She wouldn't kill him, but it was more likely that she would make him half dead. As for the materials she wanted him to gather, he now more or less understood what she wanted to do. He just happened to recall it. Luli herself was a highly skilled blacksmith. She had once talked to him about wanting to make a breakthrough in the divine weapon ranking. In the Antiquity Age, there were only 6 divine weapons other than the 12 divine swords in the divine sword record. After 3 eras, there were a total of 36 divine weapons on the divine weapon ranking except for the divine sword record. A total of 48 divine weapons could be called divine weapons. When the Dark Ruin Sword was still intact, he had once said that it was comparable to a divine weapon or even more powerful than a divine weapon. The person who made it must be a master above the divine god realm. Even the 12th divine sword was much more powerful than many divine weapons. He had once searched the world and found 4 divine weapons. However, in the last few battles, they were either broken or lost. In the end, he couldn't even keep the Dark Ruin Sword. If he had the spiritual divine body at that time, the outcome might be different. He could definitely turn the situation around with the 4 divine weapons in his hands. He wouldn't be afraid of too many masters above the divine god realm. After all, the power of the 12 divine swords was enough to threaten them. Kuan Yuan region, Blood Demon Valley, Yin Nuashing muttered. When he was in the Kuan Yuan region, he didn't forget about this. He just didn't go there because he didn't have enough power to go there. It might be a divine weapon of great success. Even divine god masters would take a detour if they saw it. They might even go back the way they came. With his current state as a complete divine god, if he led a group of people there, they would probably be wiped out, even if they had the spiritual divine body. From a certain point of view, it was a good thing that he got the time sand sword that was incomplete. The power of an incomplete sword wasn't very strong. He had many ways to get it. As for a complete one, it was basically impossible. The Dark Ruin Sword is still here. I got the Ling Hongjin back. I don't know where the 6th-ranked Red Star Sword went. There's also the 7th-ranked Origin Sword. Scratching his head in distress, Yin Nuashing felt that there were too many things to do. He definitely had to get these divine sword back. They were also a kind of backup plan. After he got them back, he had to slowly repair them. With the Ling Hongjin's ability to accommodate everything in the spiritual divine body, he could return to the divine god realm in the future. This was also a trump card. Sigh. Suddenly, he let out a heavy sigh. He didn't even know how many times he had taken that day. Life is really boring. I'm acting on stage while the others are eating melon seeds below the stage. It was a one-man show. He shook his head gloomily and waved his hand to make the Fire Phoenix speed up. This was going to be a lonely journey. There were people around him, but he felt a pain in the ass. After a long journey, Yin Nuashing could only use cultivation to pass the time. Every few days, he would wake up once, turning his head to look behind him. None of the fellows had woken up. In the spiritual world, Ziyi, Xiaobai, and Kai Xiao were still drinking tea. The few little girls would sleep when they were tired from playing. When they were full, they would continue to play. They looked quite innocent and unaffected. Yin Nuoxing also felt a little gratified. All this time, there was no one who could play with little Zihan. Now that there were two more. Although they were not of the same age, it was just right. As for the situation in his spiritual world, he couldn't bear to look at it. He was afraid that he would cry if he looked at it. This spiritual world seemed to have been packaged and redecorated repeatedly. Hum. The black pillar let out a crisp, buzzing sound, and a brilliant beam of light shot up into the sky from the pillar of creation. In the sky, one could vaguely see a huge and boundless magic array, which was roaring and trying to wake up. The divine imperial sky array of the Ganyuan region focuses on defense, but can also be used to attack. It has both the ultimate attack and the ultimate defense. Its defensive power is no weaker than the resonance defense of the Pillar of Creation. Yin Nuoxing waved his hands, causing the Pillar of Light to gradually dim. Pieces of colorful runes were engraved on the Pillar of Creation, quieting down. The magic formation in the sky that was like a faint shadow under the weak sunlight also gradually disappeared and disappeared between heaven and earth. The Divine Imperial Sky Array is a smaller version of the Divine Imperial Sky Array. Its power is also a lot weaker. Its power depends on one's understanding of the array. The deeper one's understanding of the array, the more powerful it will be. Yin Nuoxing thought for a moment, then suddenly slapped his head. I could take out those old array diagrams and repair them again. The girls have a few array masters as well. If they have enough energy, it's not impossible to let them cultivate it. The 9th grade of the divine rank was the standard for array masters. The seals, heavenly seals, and divine seals behind them were actually special grades of arrays. They weren't counted in the ranks of array masters. The title of divine master referred to array masters who were at the level of gods. Arrays at that level were divine rank arrays. They were of the same grade as Xian Arts, and Divine Arts. However, it's still a ways to use divine rank array diagrams now. Let me count. There are probably tens of thousands of them left. They were all engraved when I was bored. In the sky, Yin Nuoxing's thoughts were running wild. Array masters engraved array diagrams for special purposes. Putting aside whether the array diagrams were useful or not, just the act of engraving array diagrams could be considered as revision. Perhaps it could be called reflection. It was the same principle as practice makes perfect. By repeatedly engraving arrays, one might be able to discover something that one didn't think of before. They might be able to modify the array and increase its power. At the level of Divine Master, if one didn't know how to engrave new arrays or modify arrays, they would be laughed at by the gods. It would be passed down in the cycle of reincarnation for thousands of years. Stepping into the level of Divine Master meant that one had mastered the concept of creation. It corresponded to everything. Gods could change all the rules by themselves. The more powerful gods could make the rules more complete and straightforward. They could engrave new rules by themselves. If they could change the rules, why couldn't they create new things? In the primeval age, Quarter Moon was also keen on creating everything that could be imagined. It could be a magic array or a life form. Most of the other gods and gods were the same. As for creating a world, it was also a piece of cake. Conversely, deriving a small world was a little more difficult. However, it was something that had to be done. Unless one could find a more straightforward way of cultivation and a simpler way of understanding the origin of all things in the world. Well, many gods and gods kept thinking about it. After so many years, they still couldn't find a simpler way. Maybe deriving a small world was an unexpected truth. Yin Nuoxing retracted his gaze from the distant era and looked at the end of the world. After thinking for a while, he waved his hand and asked the Fire Phoenix to turn around and go to another place. There he lost something and picked up a few people along the way. At that time, he didn't think too much about it, and he wasn't qualified to think too much about it. However, it was different now. 2 days later, at the elemental stone in the northeast of the Ganyuan region, the huge 7-colored god stone was hundreds of thousands of feet tall. It was like the spine of the earth. Endless elemental power reverberated in this space. That was its source. The elemental stone was absorbing the elemental power of the world. It was its aura. The elemental power that floated between heaven and earth was condensed into a solid form and turned into huge circles of gods that flowed around the god stone. It was majestic, simple, and ancient. The elemental stone symbolized eternity. It was a miracle monument that spanned between heaven and earth. It displayed the layout of heaven and earth elements at the beginning of the world and the birth of the God's world. At that time, there were only 7 types of elements in the world. Yin once knew that the elemental stone might have originated from the primeval age or even older. Quarter Moon knew that the elemental stone was a miracle of heaven and earth that had appeared at the beginning of the world. It had the same origin as heaven and earth and had stood tall for more than 135 years. The elemental stone of heaven and earth was a miracle that had appeared here when the first great god created the God's world. As for the other 4 eras, he actually didn't know how the beginning of each era was calculated. Therefore, he took a reserved number on the side of the elemental stone. There was an incomparably huge crater. It was like an endless abyss. Above the crater, there were still specks of starlight that hadn't dissipated. Below the crater was an abyss. If one stared into the abyss would echo and stare back at them. Star annihilation, the art of the stars combined with all the power of the Nethervoid sword, unleashed an attack that was close to self-destructing. It left an irreparable wound on the god realm and turned many experts above the heavenly god realm into ashes. At the center of the attack, all the laws were void, so they couldn't dodge it. Even if the attack range was only 30 meters, they couldn't dodge it. Of course, he couldn't dodge it either. He had just escaped death and thought that this place would be his burial ground, but he was lucky enough to survive. Now, he had some unimportant time to bury himself. I'm here again. I'm back here again. After almost 70 eras, he was back at this place again. Yin took a deep breath and closed his eyes. Anger, despair, irritation, and many other emotions echoed in his heart. That day, that moment, it felt like it was yesterday. He clenched his fists. He would never forget that day. Calendar of the Great Yuan Realm, the beginning of the 70 eras. He would never forget that day. He hated it. He despaired. He regretted it. He only wanted to turn his body into an eternal nightmare. A mad demon that would devour this world and vent his anger that couldn't be extinguished. This flame would one day burn him and this world to ashes. After a long time, he slowly opened his eyes. There was only calmness in his eyes. He loosened his clenched fists and patted his violently beating heart. He muttered to himself, "No, it's not the time yet. It's not the time yet. I still have to endure." In this life, he had a reason that he couldn't give in. In this life, he had a reason that he couldn't admit defeat. Therefore, he couldn't make any mistakes. He couldn't make any mistakes. He could pay the price. He could pay a lot of prices. However, behind every price, there could only be his name, Yin. He was willing to give up everything he had, even if he became mad or a demon. However, he wasn't willing to gamble with the people around him. He had already made a mistake once. The bitter consequences left behind made him feel bitter even now. When he saw the 9 profound crystal coffins in the 9 deities' palace, his eyes hurt. He was such a contradictory person. From the inside out, he was full of contradictions. Perhaps even he was a contradictory existence. Just as he said, this life was the end. There was no room for any deviation in this life. Therefore, he wouldn't hesitate to burn himself up in this life and ignite the most beautiful fireworks in this world. Chapter 10:20. The place where the elemental stones were located was still silent. There were no signs of life. The residual energy here was still terrifying. Even god emperors did not dare to stay here. 9 heavenly gods and more than 100 experts above the heavenly god realm had fallen here. They had even destroyed a great accomplishment divine weapon. Even the laws of the realm of the gods could not reverse the damage caused. The residual energy here made this place a forbidden area. Many people knew that 9 heavenly gods had fallen here. However, only the higher-ups of the 9 temples knew that the 9 heavenly gods who had fallen here were their ancestors. What the others knew was only a cold battle record. Yin Nuoxing looked at the hole. His gaze was a little absent-minded. He frowned. Those words suddenly echoed in his ears. Your era has come to an end. This sentence now sounded very strange. Speaking of which, did his era really come? Could it be that the beginning of the 69th era to the beginning of the 70th era was his era? Because he had swept through the entire realm of the gods. That period of time was his. He felt that it should not be. At that moment when he was on the verge of death, something seemed to rush out of his mind. However, he could not remember. He could not remember what happened on the path of reincarnation or the underworld. Originally, he seemed to remember these memories. He remembered that he should have remembered them. Now that he thought about it, it seemed that part of his memory was missing. He did not know whether the things he had forgotten were important or not. At the last moment, I remembered that I was going to look for Serene. But why did I look for her? Was it for help? Yin Nuoxing frowned in confusion. He rubbed his forehead with his palm. He was not sure what he was thinking at that time. He had forgotten what he was thinking at that time. He only remembered that his heart was filled with anger at that time. He did not know anything else. Yin Nuoxing scratched her head and sighed as she shook her head. Perhaps it wasn't something particularly important. Otherwise, she wouldn't have forgotten about it. Also, it seemed that his so-called recovered memory was still incomplete. Perhaps 10% of his other memories were lost. Shaking his head, Yin Nuoxing waved his hand and got the fire phoenix to retreat a little while he jumped out of the energy barrier. The terrifying aura outside was mostly caused by himself. Even if many heavenly gods had fallen here, it wouldn't affect him. The energy of the heavenly gods' annihilation had been devoured by the star annihilation. What remained here was a strange aura that was led by the star arts. His divine soul had awakened, so he wasn't afraid that the remaining energy here would backfire on him. If it was anyone else who came here, it wouldn't be so easy. The aura of the stars here could devour an unprepared God Emperor expert within a minute. Even if he defended with all his might, he wouldn't be able to last that long. When the terrifying energy came into contact with Yin Nuoxing, it quietly dissipated and flowed to other places in the world. It didn't affect him at all. The bottom of the abyss was pitch black. This was nonsense, but it was so dark that it was terrifying. With Yin Nuoxing's current eyesight, he couldn't see anything at the bottom. Perhaps there was nothing at all. Even if there was something at the bottom, it should have been melted by the self-destructive attack of the star arts. He shook his head and leaped into the air. His body was glowing with specks of starlight and dazzling golden light. Light particles circled around his body as his body rapidly plunged downward. That colorful scroll, do you remember what it is? Ziya's voice gently rang in her mind. She could also feel that he had come to this place to find the colorful scroll that he had lost before coming to the elemental stones. Yin Nuoxing nodded and said, "That was originally my item. It may not be right to say that. I am not the creator of the colorful scroll. I am only the owner. I found it in an ancient star field. It recorded the secrets of that star field. That star field should have disappeared in the void by now. What is it? Is it related to the gods?" Lan Shiner also joined in the fun and asked. Yin Nuoxing muttered to herself and nodded. Then she shook her head and said, "No, it shouldn't be. The creator might be the gods, but that item shouldn't have any special relationship with the gods. The one who left the scroll behind should be a spiritual, godly body in the realm of the gods. At that time, when the scroll appeared at the bottom of the sea, my body sensed something. However, that item has nothing to do with the spiritual, godly body. It was only because the creator was the spiritual, godly body. He probably saw something in that ancient star field, but couldn't solve it, so he brought it." As she spoke, Yin Nuoxing was stunned. After thinking for a while, she said in a daze, Maybe that ancient star field hasn't disappeared yet. If we want to find it, we should still be able to find it. Since the creator couldn't solve the secrets of that place, but he still made a copy of it, he might be able to preserve that place forever. The gods were unreasonable creatures and could do anything. However, even if that ancient star field really existed somewhere in the void, they might not be able to find it. When Z found the scroll back then, he didn't pay much attention to the void coordinates of that world. Moreover, the world itself wasn't static in the void. They would also drift in the void. Other than not crossing the plane boundary, it was uncertain where they would drift to. Wait a minute. At that time, there was a change in the scroll under the sea abyss. This means that the colorful scroll should be related to something under the sea abyss, right? Zi said, shaking her head. Yin Nuoshing frowned. This was also a problem. Actually, I'm not sure. When I opened the scroll, it was quite difficult. At that time, I didn't know how it would react to the realm of the gods. If there's really a secret hidden under the sea that even the gods don't know about, it could only be the place that no one has ever set foot in the realm of the gods. It's called the bottom of the world. It's a place that is protected by the laws and concepts. It's a place that no one can set foot in. That place, I've heard of that place many times. However, it seems that no one can enter it. I don't know what's there, Lon Exeter said, swinging her legs. There are people who studied the bottom of the world during the mythological era. Yin Nuoshing was a little surprised. He thought that the place should not be a secret during the mythological era. Brother Nuoshing, the mythological era seems very mysterious to you. In fact, it was just a group of people who were more powerful in the realm of the gods calculating how to spend their days. The things that should be known were known by the entire realm of the gods. Small secrets were only known by a small group of people, which is the original region. However, this bottom of the world was still called the Eternal Forbidden Land at that time. It was a place that no one could ever set foot in and could never enter. Therefore, it was given such a name. It was simple and easy to remember. Lon Xener spread her hands helplessly. Yin Nuoshing and Ziyi were speechless. This sounded simple and straightforward, although it was said that way. Yin Nuoshing coughed dryly and said helplessly. However, that era disappeared too thoroughly. Things that could not be obtained and things that were unknown always aroused people's curiosity and desire to explore. After all, curiosity is the beginning of courting death. That's right, courting death. Everything that was done out of curiosity and to explore the end or the origin of the realm of the gods is the beginning of courting death. People will always want to explore some big secrets that cannot be touched or revealed to the world. Often, it will cause trouble and even get themselves killed. It's a small matter. Most of the original region, or even the entire realm of the gods, will be implicated. If this is not courting death, then what is? Since the forbidden land that was created by the heavens and earth has a fixed challenger, this world has entered the ranks of courting death. There are some places that hide secrets that only enlightened masters and above can explore. Look at me, I'm courting death. I touched something that I shouldn't touch out of curiosity. I won't be able to rest in peace even if I die. He pointed at himself and shook his head helplessly. Why else would people say that curiosity killed not only a cat, but also several enlightened masters? Moreover, hundreds of enlightened masters and above, as well as an entire world, were buried with them. This was probably the funeral of the highest standard in history. Zi and Lon Xin were speechless, so they were very curious about what kind of things you encountered that you were chased into reincarnation. Yin Nuoshing's gaze became a little deep. They had been to several forbidden places, such as the Earth Grotto, the Tana's Water God Temple, the Haunted Forest, the Eye of the Storm Sea, and the Heavenly Abyss. Some of the forbidden places were naturally formed, while some were strange places that were created by the death of some ancient existence. For example, the death of an enlightened master was not the scariest thing. The scariest thing was that they were in a half-dead, half-dreaming state. The former could not control the leakage of their power, just like how a person's power would leak out when he or she was severely injured. However, if it was an ordinary person, it would not be a big deal. But if an enlightened master leaked a little bit of uncontrollable power, it could cause unspeakable damage to a world. After all, They were masters who had transcended the rules of the world and transcended the restrictions of the rules. Even a little bit of their power could change the rules of the world. It was normal for uncontrollable power to change the rules of the world. As for the half-dreaming state, it was easy to not know whether it was a dream or reality. Then, all kinds of situations would occur. However, such situations were quite rare. The lifespan of an enlightened master was equivalent to infinite. The half-dreaming state would only occur when one was dying of old age. Unless there was some injury on the body that made one's lifespan no longer equal to infinite. In short, for a master of this level and a life form of this level, if they did not die and hid in some corner, it would be easy for them to create a terrifying place because of the leakage of their power. So what is at the bottom of the eternal world? Zi sighed tiredly. Yin Nuoxing and Lan Hexen said in unison, "Who knows?" In the mythological era, many enlightened masters went to study it, but they did not get any results. They did not know where to start. There are many restrictions at the level of the rules there. It is a hard bone to chew through. Lan Hexen shrugged cutely. In the primeval age, I brought the Book of Epics to investigate it, but I did not get any results. The intertwining rules, intertwining concepts, and karma are almost twisted into a fried dough twist. If you want to investigate it, you have to first unlock the concept lock of karma law that is twisted into a fried dough twist. In short, it is very strange and is constantly changing. Old Sean and I speculated that if you want to unlock this thing, your deduction ability must reach the level where you can deduce 1,000,000,000,000 years into the future in a second. Just seeing 1,000,000,000,000 years into the future is nothing. Moreover, you have to maintain the progress of 10,000,000 years in a second and know exactly what happened in the realm of the gods in the past 10,000,000 years. The margin of error cannot be more than 10%. That kind of huge amount of calculation. Anyway, I am dizzy. Yin Nuoxing sighed. Will this thing kill people? Ziyi was speechless. Just hearing about it was scary enough. Not necessarily. When an enlightened master activates the divine statue to deduce, he can deduce a very, very far future. It is not impossible to deduce an entire era. It is just that we do not know whether it is accurate or not. The further the time, the greater the margin of error. Moreover, the moment you observe the future, the margin of error will start to appear. Yin Nuoxing spread her hands. The divine statue's deduction is quite simple, but it is also quite unreliable. Otherwise, why would there be enlightened masters at the realm of the gods? It is because this thing is not very reliable. The further you look, the more fake the future is. Lan Hexen nodded in agreement. She had also heard a lot about this. As they talked, Yin Nuoxing felt that she had almost reached the bottom. The speed of her descent gradually decreased from the speed of light. Light elements gathered around her body. Her 6 wings fanned out the light particles, illuminating the surroundings. She could not see the wall on the opposite side. She could only land on one side of the wall. This was very normal. She did not know how big this crater was. It was estimated that it was much bigger than the crater in the Godly Tiger Mountain Villa. We are here. When the ground appeared in her sight, Yin Nuoxing let out a sigh of relief. Her 6 wings fanned gently, and the speed of her descent decreased. In a short while, she landed on the ground and stood firmly on both her feet. Suddenly, an electric current spread from the soles of her feet. Her whole body trembled, and she shivered. She grinned and said, "It seems that this place has reached the bottom. It is stuck together with a layer of rules. My current position is only a few centimeters away from the bottom of the world. It is these few centimeters that have killed countless enlightened masters." Ziyi and Lan Hexen looked at the ground through her vision. They could only see a layer of ordinary stone ground. There were no broken stones, not even stone powder. The ground in this place had been melted by the purest power of the stars. It had been directly reduced to nothing. Not even dregs were left behind. Yin Nuoxing looked around. She pressed her palm lightly on the wall. Then, she walked toward the center of the giant pit. When I first obtained this scroll, I did not find any remains or relics nearby. If deities or enlightened masters wanted to leave something behind, their bodies would turn into relics after they died. If they did not want to leave anything behind, they would not leave anything behind. I did not see the creator of the scroll or his remains. I'm not even sure if the creator was a spiritual divine body at the level of an enlightened master, Yin Nuashing said. What? Ziyi and Lan Xiner asked. How should I put it? Yin Nuashing scratched her head. She thought for a while and said, It is a kind of intuition. When I opened the colorful scroll, I could see that there were many traces of heaven and earth on the scroll that did not belong to man-made. Perhaps this thing was born from the world itself. Then, the spiritual divine body at the level of an enlightened master completed it? Or maybe it got that thing, accidentally saw that star field, and imprinted it into the scroll? Ziyi said. Yin Nuashing shrugged. Maybe it was so, and maybe it was not. Who knew? No matter how close the spiritual divine body was with heaven and earth, it should not be able to disguise the traces it left behind as if they were traces of heaven and earth. Moreover, it should be able to deceive the other enlightened masters. However, this theory could not be proven until he returned to the level of an enlightened master with the origin of the spiritual divine body. The light element could not illuminate too far. This place was full of strong rules and oppression. Even sunlight could not reach this place because it was too deep. After leaving the end of the wall, the surroundings were pitch black. Fortunately, he had left an energy imprint on the wall as a road sign. He would not get lost in this place. However, as he walked, he still felt that the surroundings were too dark and oppressive. He could not help but speed up. Unknowingly, he did not know how far he had walked. Yin Nuashing walked quickly for a while and then stopped. Because he was not sure where he was, he could only walk step by step. In this damned place, the range of his soul's senses was also limited. You've been walking for 4 hours, right? Ziyi could not help but ask. It's so boring. The rules and oppression here are too strong. Hundreds of enlightened masters and those above the enlightened master had died here. The energy disturbances left behind here cannot be underestimated. If it was not because I created this place and awakened my soul, even I might not have been able to walk in here. Yin Nuashing spread his hands. This is already the limit. I don't know where the scroll went after it ran down here. We can only look for it slowly. Anyway, there's plenty of time. Speaking of which, there's nothing to rush, right? Ziyi replied with an Just as she turned a page of the book, her hand trembled. She said, Ahem, little star, on the front right, there's an obscure energy fluctuation. Let's go there and take a look. This slightly strange change in address made him smile, helplessly. He nodded and tapped his feet on the ground. His 6 wings were tightly folded. His body was like an arrow that was close to the ground. However, after a while, he also felt the energy fluctuation. At this time, his senses were not as sharp as Ziyi's. Ziyi was a divine being of heaven and earth, and was even given a godhead body. Although he had a spiritual, godly body, and his soul had awakened, his soul was still a divine soul. His realm was not high. In short, due to various reasons, although his senses were very strong, Ziyi could also enhance her own senses through his senses. In fact, the reverse was also true. He could also use Ziyi's senses to enhance his senses. However, in terms of energy sensitivity, he was still a little weaker. Could it be someone who didn't die dozens of years ago? Lan Xiner asked in a gloomy tone. I did confirm that they were all dead back then. There shouldn't be anyone who managed to escape. Star annihilation is a self-destructive attack, and it doesn't even take the attacker into consideration. Since it's a self-destructive attack, the attacker wouldn't be able to withstand it. Furthermore, it's supported by the power of the Nethervoid sword. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any ghosts or gods within the crater. Yin Nuashing shook his head. In fact, he wasn't sure whether there was anything alive in this place that could be called life. There's nothing alive. In the end, he waved his hand and decided the answer simply. Ziyi and Lan Xiner were speechless. Yin Nuashing himself didn't know whether there was anything alive or not. But it was reasonable to say that there shouldn't be any living things, especially those masters who were above the divine realm. If they were still alive, they wouldn't have allowed Yin Nuoxing, who was still breathing, to walk out of here. 10 minutes later, Yin Nuoxing approached the energy source. When he saw clearly what was there, he couldn't help but tremble. That was Ziyi and Lan Xian, who were also paying attention to what was happening. When they saw that thing clearly, they both gasped. Kaixia saw it and couldn't help but take a look. As a result, she was dumbfounded. She didn't recognize that thing. In the place where the energy source was located, there were two things. One was wrapped in a ball of light, floating 2 meters above the ground. Below the ground, there was a long object partially buried in the ground. That object was surrounded by thumb-sized stars, as if it was the center of the star field, slowly rotating around it. At a glance, one could only see tens of thousands of stars. That's... Yin Nuoxing narrowed his eyes and couldn't help but stop. Chapter 1021. At the bottom of the pitch-black pit, there were tens of thousands of stars twinkling. Yin Nuoxing stood there, and the tens of thousands of stars suddenly came to life and became very large. Each of them was tens of thousands of feet in size. They twinkled at the bottom of the giant pit and scattered light in all directions. It looked very much like the tens of thousands of burning stars in the star field. I didn't expect to see it here. I was wondering where I had lost it. Yin Nuoxing rubbed his palms, and a faint smile appeared on his face. Then it faded away. He was no longer excited. Even when he saw his old friend, he just sighed and said, "So you're still here." However, the old friend had a much bigger reaction than him. Originally, there were only some small stars, but after Yin Nuoxing came, they became stars all over the sky. There was a sense of joy that reverberated in this space, as if telling him the excitement of meeting again after such a long time. The Red Star Sword, which is ranked 6th. Yin Nuoxing was not too excited, but Ziyi sighed. She also recognized what it was. The ball of light floating in the air was the colorful scroll, and the one buried in the ground was the Red Star Sword. Ah, is it a divine sword other than the Netherworld ruins? Brother Nuoxing, come closer and let me see. Lan Xian also looked excited, and she hurriedly urged Yin Nuoxing to come closer. Yin Nuoxing smiled helplessly and patted his head. Then he lifted his foot. As soon as he took a step, the colorful scroll trembled, separated from the ball of light, and flew toward him. Reaching out to grab the colorful scroll, Yin Nuoxing sighed. He had originally come to this big pit to look for it, but he did not expect to unexpectedly see the Red Star Sword. It seemed that he had lost it here after the battle back then. The Origin Sword was probably lost in the same way. It was unlikely that he would be able to find it again. After all, he himself had forgotten where he had lost it. He did not lose it on his own accord. After all, he had used up all of his energy and was sent flying by them. He had been sent flying along with his sword. The Red Star Sword was considered quite lucky to have been left here. This was a place that no one had dared to set foot in for dozens of eras, let alone go down. The density of the energy in this place was enough to make a god suffer. Furthermore, the Scarlet Star Sword was here as well. This was a divine sword that could counterattack on its own. If anyone approached it, it would slash at them without a second thought. The 12 divine swords were probably also capricious. Back when he had subdued the Netherruin sword and the others, he had almost lost a life. Moreover, it was the kind of sword that could save a life. "All right, now that we have a scroll, why don't you open it and let us have a look?" Violet Knight said. She was rather curious about what was inside the scroll that he had described as miraculous. Yin Nuoxing smiled and said, "There is no rush." As he spoke, he walked toward the Red Star Sword that was on the ground. As he approached, the Red Star Sword flashed with light. It seemed to be very excited. It was a long sword that was as black as a galaxy and covered with stars. It was about 3 meters long, but only half of it was visible from the ground. On the body of the sword, 12 crimson stars were arranged in a line. They were engraved on both sides of the sword. Those stars seemed to be real, and they were all flashing with light. Yin Nuoxing walked closer, stretched out his hand, and flicked the body of the sword with his finger. A crisp ding sound rang out, and the stars on the Red Star Sword burned even brighter. He could not help but laugh. The 12 divine swords, at least the 4 divine swords that he knew so far, all had a large part of their consciousness. The Netherruin sword was even more so. It had its own soul. Most of the weapons that were forged had their own consciousness. The higher the level of the weapon, the clearer the consciousness. For example, weapons at the level of eternal divine weapons could almost communicate with their wielder, not to mention divine weapons. Among them, only the divine right weapons were a little more special. Perhaps because they were too powerful, they did not have their own consciousness and soul. Little guy, I'm already like this. Do you still remember me? Yun Nuashing poked the red star sword with a smile, as if he was teasing a child. Buzz, buzz. The red star sword flashed with light as if it was responding to him. This made his smile even wider. They still remembered him and his soul. The Netherruin sword had long been integrated into his soul and had reincarnated with him. Ling Hongjian had recognized him even before his divine soul had awakened. At that time, his divine body had not awakened. Although he still had some functions, it was actually not because of this aspect. Ling Hongjian followed him only because he still recognized his soul. Huh. Yin Nuashing held the sword hilt with his right hand and shouted softly. He used his strength. In fact, he did not use much strength. With a gentle pull, he pulled the red star sword out of the ground. This made his face twitch. He thought that he would have to use a lot of strength. Yin Nuashing pulled out this 3-meter-long sword and waved it twice. He lifted it up and looked at it carefully for a while. He reached out his hand and touched the few red stars. They were still hot. However, the red stars near the tip of the sword had dimmed. It is still damaged. It seems like it only has the energy of the 6th level left. Its power should not be affected too much. He bent his finger and tapped it lightly. Those huge stars that filled the sky retracted back into the sword. Those were all transformed by the power of the red star sword. The remnant power of the stars in this place. It seems like the red star sword has been using the remnant power of this place to repair itself in the past 70 years. It's just that the progress is a little slow. Yin Nuashing muttered. The process of repairing a divine sword was very huge. It was not possible to repair it by himself. He could only wait for the divine sword to suggest that it was time to repair it by itself. Until now, he still could not figure out how to repair these divine swords. In the end, he could only wait for them to slowly repair themselves. His divine body could speed up the process. He raised his hand and waved it. The red star sword drew a trail of starlight in the sky. Some stars were annihilated. An extremely fine crack appeared in the space. It was silent. In this life, I will have to trouble you again. Yin Nuashing sighed as his palm gently stroked the sword. He seemed to be whispering to an old friend. Buzz. The red star sword flickered and let out a soft buzzing sound. It was like a reply. He could not help but smile. He nodded and stored it in his divine body. It seems like the red star sword sensed my aura first and grabbed the scroll. I hope that one day I can come back here to look for the scroll and retrieve it along the way. After putting away the red star sword, Yin Nuashing looked at the colorful scroll in his left hand and could not help but sigh. This scroll did not have any consciousness at all. The only thing that could make it move and still exist at the bottom of this huge pit, other than a layer of rules under his feet, was probably the red star sword that he had just taken away. He glanced at the colorful scroll. It was quiet now. It was clearly standing in front of this layer of laws, but it suddenly lost its life. The light on its surface was also much dimmer. He stretched out his right hand and tapped on one of the two ends of the scroll. A weak power of divine right flowed and entered the scroll. After a while, the colors on the surface of the colorful scroll suddenly became active. They spread out rapidly. They drilled out of the surface of the scroll and extended into space. Buzz! Suddenly, a strong ray of light shot up into the sky from the center of the scroll. It flew out for thousands of feet and suddenly stopped. The ray of light suddenly exploded. A gorgeous color that resembled a painting appeared above. It flowed up and down like a long river. Yin Nuashing waved his hand and threw the scroll into the sky. It sank into the long river of colors. The long river of colors hanging above his head bubbled like boiling water. The long river of colors wriggled and continued to spread further and further. It also dropped down and landed on the ground. It did not go past his legs. However, he was not surprised at all. He had opened it once in the past and was already shocked. Seeing it now, he only lifted his leg and shook it a little. He did not feel anything solid. Ziyi and the others looked at this scene nervously. The long river of colors continued to spread and gradually fell from above. It enveloped this part of the world. Yin Nuoxing took 2 steps back and retreated to the edge of the curtain, surrounded by the long river of colors. He raised his head. Was the curtain surging? It had already trapped this part of the world. Now it was time to reveal it. It suddenly expanded. What appeared in front of him was an incomparably magnificent star domain. Tens of thousands of magnificent galaxies lay in front of him. The colorful star domain had been like this since ancient times, but it was not unchanging. It was distant and ancient, and no one had set foot in it. Further away, the net-like structure of the galaxies was even more gorgeous. This star domain was like an infinitely enlarged spider web. This was not a static scene. In the distance, he could see stars being annihilated. A torrent of energy the size of a large star illuminated the entire vast star domain. The destructive impact caused huge, wave-like ripples to appear in space. The unparalleled shock wave tore the surrounding stars into pieces. The fall of a large star even illuminated an infinitely collapsed space in the distance. It was like a spatial singularity. The space there was extremely distorted. It was like a hole in the layer of space. Everything in the present world would flow through that hole into the void. The net-like structure of the cluster of galaxies surrounded this noisy star domain. Countless stars flickered and countless rays of light gathered here. However, they were unable to illuminate the darkness here. This place was just like what he had seen before. It should have changed, but it would never change. It was just a mark of that star domain. What are these? Star domain? Through Yin Nuoxing's eyes, Zai saw the magnificent and gorgeous starry sky. Mei Mao was stunned. Such a gorgeous starry sky could only be seen in the depths of the star domain. There were very few life forms in those places, and very few people would set foot there. It's just an ordinary star domain. However, it's not an ordinary star domain. Yin Nuoxing nodded. Her eyes were fixed on a large star. The impact of the fiery star's death destroyed everything within a radius of several light years. In just an instant, ignoring the laws and speed, the remnant energy of the fallen star was completely devoured by the spatial singularity. It was not a black hole, but a singularity created by the wrong laws. Everything in this star domain leaked endless matter into the void through such a small singularity. In the distance, a new star was born. It was a rising star, and its light illuminated the entire star field. It was dozens of times larger than the fiery red giant from before. It was a dazzling golden star, and even further away, there was a black star. The black star was empty, releasing an ominous light. The red that in its core dyed it with a strange color. The ominous symbol was a star of calamity. Its size was so huge that a red star that passed by it suddenly changed its trajectory and strangely plunged into the black star. It did not even cause a ripple. The collision between 2 star systems happened in the blink of an eye. It ignored all the laws in this world. This star domain was very strange. Star Creation Chart. I remember this name. Yin Nuoxing squinted his colorful eyes and stared at the galaxy. The Book of Epics floated beside him, but it was useless. The large amount of information that surged into his mind was meaningless. He could not even find a single piece of meaningful information. In an instant, all the information was disassembled and reassembled 100 billion times, but he still could not find any useful information. He still could not form any useful information. This galaxy was very strange. There were traces of rules everywhere, but everywhere was against the rules. There were no rules or rules to speak of. The descent and annihilation of the stars happened in an instant. The net-like cluster of galaxies could be distorted in an unbelievable manner in his sight, twisting in an even more unbelievable arc. This place was extremely chaotic. Laws and anti-laws, and even nothingness filled every inch of space. This was not something that could be done in a normal world. No world would be able to do this. An inch of space was divided into 10 different law zones. In a single star, there were tens of thousands of completely different laws. This caused its shape to be distorted. It was neither circular nor oval. It was distorted like a sea urchin. It was even hollow. A part of the center had been dug out, but it was still burning normally. The space here is infinite. The laws are infinite. Causality is infinite. Because everything is infinite, they can also be reversed at any time, 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 at any time. Everything can be repeated. Everything can be reversed. Everything can return to the beginning. Everything can be fast-forwarded to the end. This is an eternal land of chaos, Yin Nuoxing said calmly. Zai widened her eyes in confusion. She saw a star that had just exploded into pieces. In the next second, the fragments and energy suddenly flowed backward and reformed the star. Then, the star crazily shrunk and became brighter and brighter. In the end, it returned to dust. The dust then merged with the other stars. This place was even more absurd than the nothingness. The nothingness was nothing. There were many things here, but everything was like a game. You could never guess what would happen in the next second. Countless stars were born and destroyed. Countless galaxies were formed and destroyed. This place was like a nightmare. Don't doubt your eyes. Everything you see is real. This is an image copied from that galaxy. There is no trace of modification. No one is controlling it. It really happened. It really happened in the depths of a galaxy in a certain world. Yin Nuoxing's eyes were deep. He was still trying to unravel all the secrets in this map, but he could not. Back then, with the power of God and the Book of Epics, he could not unravel any information even after 1,000 years. He did not even gain anything, let alone now. Every time the star creation map is opened, it will evolve from the beginning. Is the scene that you just saw? Then it will continue to evolve. The evolution of stars, birth and destruction, the condensation and dispersion of galaxies, the changes of space singularities, and it will continue to change until it closes. There will not be any repetitive scenes. There will not be any repetitive information. Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath. I once spent 1,000 years studying this thing, but I did not gain anything. It took me 3 years to get rid of the messy information in my head. After that, I almost developed star domain phobia. I was scared by this thing. Just looking at it as a map may be pleasing to the eye. At most, you will feel dizzy after looking at it for a long time. But if you want to understand something from it, you can probably give up. Anyway, I have had enough of those 1,000 years. I have no idea what this thing is. I maliciously guess that the person who carved this galaxy back then was disgusted by it and threw it aside because he could not stand it. Yin Nuoxing said with a dark face. After that, he sighed again. In short, it is such a strange thing. Later, when I was about to die, I threw it away. I did not expect that after 70 eras, it would fall into my hands again. It is destined to be you, Rosy Cloud said faintly. Yin Nuoxing, I would rather not be destined. This thing is really useless. I really can't tell what it is. I can't bear to throw it away. If I don't throw it away, I won't be able to find out its value. At least, you can give me some clues and let me know what this thing is related to. That way, there will be some hope and some hope. But even Xian Ying can't tell what this thing is. Zai and the others were silent. They really had no clue at all. Xian Ying was also an enlightened master. According to his own latest guess, she might be a master above the enlightened master. If even she could not figure it out, what was this star map creation? But she did not open it to see what was inside. But I think even if she did not open it, she would know what was inside. Yin Nuoxing scratched his head and said, I always feel that the space singularity is very interesting. Have you ever entered it? Zai suddenly said something very scary. Lonix and Rosy Clouds were so scared that they trembled. That place was not a good place at first glance. Were they sure that nothing scary would happen if they went in? I went in. It was nothing. I just went into the void. That space singularity is very strange. It is like a hole in the real world. Behind the hole is the void. All the useless energy in this star field will be lost into the void through the hole. After a circle in the void, it will return to the real world and form a star that was born abruptly, achieving a wonderful balance. Yin Nuashing frowned and said, "Also, I was not affected by the space singularity. I went in by myself, but according to what I saw and felt, the energy was sucked there. Maybe it is not in that star field, so there's no way to know what is going on. Also, whatever we do, we won't leave any traces here. I think this is a place worth paying attention to." Yin Nuashing's mind was in a mess. The scene he saw was like a trigger, reminding him of the 1,000 years he had been sitting here. It was a really troublesome time, and it was not just his brain that was hurting. Several people sat here with him every day, pulling their hair and biting their fingers. Their eyes were bloodshot. As gods, they actually had dark circles under their eyes. In order to deduce everything here, the accuracy of the deity statue's deduction dropped from 70% to less than 20%. Lao Shan and the others almost had a nervous breakdown. In the end, only Luo Guang and him were left sitting here. However, after the 1,000th year, the two of them could not bear it anymore and had to stop. At that time, their clothes were messy, their appearance was unkempt, and they looked unkempt. People would believe that they were savages if they went out, but they did not have the high and mighty appearance of gods. Later, the few of them fell silent. Looking at the star field, they felt dizzy. Yin Nuashing was fine, as he was already used to it. However, Ziyi and the others could not stand it anymore. After looking at it for only 10 minutes, they already felt dizzy. Yin Nuashing had no choice but to put away the star map. It seems that we still can't solve the mystery here in this life. Yin Nuashing sighed. Chapter 1022. The star territory unfolded in front of his eyes, rapidly shrank. The vast and boundless star territory all turned into a colorful stream of water, like the ink on an ink painting flowing backward. All of it shrank upward, shrank into a dot, and returned to the original appearance of the colorful scroll. It gradually fell from midair and was caught by Yin Nuashing. It's a pity that I have a big secret in my hands, but I can't know what this secret is. Gently stroking the colorful scroll with his palm, Yin Nuashing sighed and shook his head helplessly. He didn't know if the godly being that left the scroll also had the same mentality as him. He was extremely depressed and crazy. This is the truth of the world, but they couldn't solve it. They were all melancholy and anxious. Thinking about it this way, could it be that the godly being that received the spirit knew that he couldn't solve it, so he threw the scroll away? Yin Nuashing sighed. He didn't know, and he didn't want to care so much. If he continued to study it, he would probably just repeat the same 1,000 years. Before he stepped into a higher realm, he probably couldn't see what this thing was. In this world, there were always some secrets that would be covered in dust for eternity. If the enlightened masters couldn't solve it, then he would wait until he was above the enlightened master level to solve it. He held the colorful scroll and shook it on the ground. After confirming that it didn't have any reaction to this damn layer of rules, he helplessly put it away. He shook his head and disappeared in a flash, rushing toward the surface of the big pit. It didn't take long for him to reach the surface of the big pit. Yin Nuashing didn't stop. He continued to fly upward for a while before stopping. He turned around and looked down at the big pit. He wasn't high enough yet, so he couldn't take in everything at a glance. He looked at this huge abyss and couldn't help but sigh. His eyes were dim. The next moment, the 6 wings behind him spread out. Just as he waved his hand, his expression froze. He turned his head in confusion and looked at the opposite side of the big pit. There were actually a lot of people gathered there. There were also all kinds of divine birds and strange beasts suspended in midair. Those strange beasts all had people with powerful auras sitting on them. Their eyes swept across the big pit. He rushed out of the big pit. Although he used the speed of light, it seemed that a small number of people noticed him and focused their eyes on him. Why is there someone here? Yin Nuashing was a little surprised. This crater was filled with an extremely powerful energy. It wasn't that the energy around it was weak, but once one entered the crater, the energy would be unimaginably dense, especially near the elemental stones. Even outside the crater, the energy was still overflowing, and a conservative estimate was that it could kill tens of thousands of god emperors. This high-energy area had always been a place that everyone kept a respectful distance from. It was really rare to see a guest here today. According to the records, the exploration of the big pit beside the elemental stones ended a few years ago. At the cost of the death of 20 god emperors, the exploration ended in a hurry. Yin Nuoxing recalled those words and narrowed his eyes. They really didn't learn from their mistakes. A bunch of god emperors had just died a few years ago, and not even their ashes were left behind. Now, there were people coming to explore the elemental stones. He reckoned that these people didn't even know what they were looking for. It was possible that they were just a bunch of people who were sent to their deaths because of their curiosity. The scale is quite big. They even sent out high-level gods. They don't know what's good for them. Yin Nuoxing sneered and shook his head. He couldn't be bothered with these people. Just as he was about to continue attacking, there was suddenly a burst of golden light. It actually rushed straight into the big pit and swept toward him. However, the speed of the golden light suddenly decreased by tens of times after entering the big pit and became extremely slow. Yin Nuoxing's hand seal was interrupted once again. His face twitched. He turned around impatiently and looked at the golden light that was sweeping toward him. There was actually a person inside, and, judging from his aura, he was quite strong. He had the strength of the Emperor of the Netherworld. That Emperor of the Netherworld expert came to 100 feet in front of Yin Nuoxing. He glanced at him and found that he only had the aura of a demigod. He couldn't help but be stunned. Then, a sharp light flashed in his eyes. "Who are you? Why did you appear from the bottom of the abyss of elements? What's down there?" Yin Nuoxing narrowed his eyes and glanced at the group of people. He said indifferently, "I should be the one asking you this question. Who are you? What are you doing here?" He had planned to seal this place and let it slowly recover. The rules that filled this place were quite destructive. They were all affected by the power of the divine right back then. Those powers had already dissipated. There was still an extremely rich power of the stars left, but it affected the rules here. If he didn't erase it, this big pit called the Elemental Abyss would not disappear. He didn't have any good feelings about this place, nor did he have any thoughts of nostalgia. It would be best if he could erase it, but the others didn't seem to think so. Don't you know that the Holy Transforming Mountain, Five Treasures Sect, and Feng family have joined forces to explore the Elemental Abyss in the Ganyuan region? That Emperor of the Netherworld expert sneered. The people in the distance were also quite shocked. They had come here several times. Every time, they were careful and didn't lose much. They even researched ways to reduce the influence of the big pit. They didn't expect to see a person appear from the big pit this time. His strength could be said to be weak, and he didn't seem to be affected. That demigod is actually not affected by the elemental abyss. Everyone was a little shocked. They knew how terrifying the elemental abyss was. Even divine emperors couldn't escape death if they entered it. They had to research ways to resist it, but they couldn't hold on forever. If they didn't know that divine emperors have been buried here before, no one would spend so much effort to come to this place of life and death. They cherish their own lives very much. I don't know. I've never heard of it. Yin Nuoxing shook his head indifferently. He glanced at him and said, "There's nothing at the bottom of the abyss. You can leave now. This is just the place where my ancestors were buried. It has existed for dozens of eras. It's time to close it." The Emperor of the Underworld frowned and sneered. Just as he was about to say something, Yin Nuoxing impatiently took out a 9-colored token and said indifferently, "I'm just here to carry out a mission. If you have any objections, you can come to the Divine Land to talk." When a 9-colored token appeared, the Emperor of the Underworld's expression suddenly changed. They were a quasi-first-rate force in the Ganyuan region. They just happened to be near the elemental stones. They had coveted this place for a long time and studied it for a long time before they found a way to enter the elemental abyss. They didn't expect to meet such a fierce person today. In the realm of the gods, there weren't many who dared to go against this group of fierce people. who in the realm of the gods didn't know about the 9 divine temples. If you don't leave now, I'll call someone over. I'll ask the great elder to arrange things in the Ganyuan region. Yin Nuoxing said indifferently. The emperor of the underworld was shocked. He quickly waved his hand and said, No, I'll leave now. As he said that, he thought of something and couldn't help but be shocked. The ancestral master's burial place? He knew that several heavenly gods had fallen in this abyss dozens of years ago, but he didn't know who was buried in it. Now that he heard Yin Nuoxing say that, cold sweat broke out all over his body. Could it be that those heavenly gods were the 9 divine temples' ancestors? Heavens! If the people of the 9 divine temples knew that they had been alive and kicking in the burial place of their ancestors for thousands of years, they would probably pull out their tendons and skin them alive. In the realm of the gods, those who offended the 9 divine temples usually didn't have a good ending. If this kind of thing was spread and the 9 divine temples shook, the Ganyuan region would be in danger. She seemed to already know. Then they could only... The emperor of the underworld's expression kept changing. Suddenly, a fierce glint flashed in his eyes. Yin Nuoxing happened to see it. She couldn't help but sigh. The token disappeared with a flip of her hand, and in its place was a black hammer. She pointed at the emperor of the underworld and said coldly, You seem to have other ideas? This time, she didn't suppress the aura of the 12th rank eternal divine weapon. The emperor of the underworld's face turned pale with fright. He took a few steps back before he felt a little better. However, the golden barrier around him was already on the verge of collapse. He was so scared that his face turned pale. He quickly cupped his hands and said, No, I just thought wrongly. We didn't know that this abyss belonged to the 9 divine temples' ancestors. Shut up and move aside. I don't want to listen to you. I know you can't destroy this place. The 9 divine temples just don't want to bother with you. Do you think we don't know what you are doing here? Yin Nuoxing narrowed her eyes and said coldly. Then she stuck out her tongue in her heart. In fact, they really don't know. The 9 divine temples knew that the abyss of elements was the place where the 9 ancestors fell, but they didn't come here often. When the previous temple masters took office, they would come here for a day or two to feel the remnant aura of the ancestors. In Yin Nuoxing's opinion, this behavior was meaningless. What was left here was only the remnant aura of the ancestors. There was no other aura that they could feel. Now, the coffins of the 9 ancestors had been brought back. In the future, the new temple master could find another place to meditate. As for the people who came to explore this place, the temple masters knew that they were from the previous eras. They didn't know that there were people who were exploring the abyss of elements in this era. Even if they knew, they wouldn't care. After all, there was nothing there in the first place. However, just because they didn't care, it didn't mean that others didn't care. When the emperor of the underworld heard the news about the 9 divine temples and saw the 12th rank eternal divine weapon, he was so scared that his aura became unstable. His body trembled, and he quickly said, Yes, we will retreat. We will retreat. No one knew what scared him out of his wits. Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but shake her head when she saw that the emperor of the underworld, who was so arrogant because he saw that she was only a demigod, was now running away with his tail between his legs. It seemed that the reputation of the 9 divine temples wasn't as effective as a hammer. That guy was actually a little desperate. Yin Nuoxing waved the hammer and sighed. She didn't care about the commotion caused by the emperor of the underworld's return. She put away the giant hammer and began to form hand seals. 5 extremely dim black divine halos slowly appeared behind her. Even in broad daylight, the visibility of the divine halos couldn't be compared to a shadow. One could only see them when they were extremely close. Whoosh! Yin Nuoxing's hand seals changed. The 7 elemental water streams that were flowing around the elemental stone in midair suddenly trembled as if they were affected by a huge force. They trembled and left the elemental stone and rushed toward the abyss of elements. As they rushed over, the 7 elemental water streams also increased in size. In just a few breaths' time, they became 100,000 feet long, like a heavenly river. Come! Yin Nuoxing shouted softly. Her hands drew an arc in midair, and the 7 elemental water streams forcibly gathered into one. They condensed into 7 colors and streaked past Yun Nuashing. Then they turned and fell into the abyss below. Like a waterfall, the sky reverberated with a loud sound of water splashing. Everyone at the edge of the abyss was shocked. The Emperor of the Underworld sucked in a breath of cold air. He knew that he had met a living ancestor. No one had ever been able to use the power of the elemental stone, not even the gods. The person he met today, a demigod, used the most violent method to seize the power of the elemental stone. He didn't know whether to exclaim that she was worthy of being called a member of the 9 Gods Temple, or to fear that he had met a monster. He didn't even have the slightest idea. He hurriedly led his people and rushed to the distance, not daring to stay for even a second. When the other 2 parties saw this, they were confused and shocked. However, they didn't have time to think too much. The news that the former had just brought back had made them tremble with fear. They had been jumping around here for so long, and it was not much different from jumping around the ancestral graves of the 9 Gods Temple. The 9 Gods Temple was kind enough to not kill them. In fact, they were all imagining things because the 9 Gods Temple really couldn't be bothered to pay attention to them. Yin Nuashing also couldn't be bothered to pay attention to them. Recently, he had been constantly reminded of the past, and his mental state was not very stable. If he fought, he might have a sudden cerebral hemorrhage. If he couldn't take it anymore, he might massacre half of the origin region. Because he knew that his current state was not very stable, he advised the Emperor of the Underworld to stay away from him. It would be good if he could be tactful and leave. Sigh. He sighed heavily and waved his hands. The huge waterfall suddenly shrank in size and gradually fell from the sky to the ground. It turned into a colorful river that was thousands of feet wide. It gushed out from the elemental stone and flowed slowly along the ground into the elemental abyss. Other than myself, only the energy of the elemental stone can neutralize the traces of destruction that I left behind back then. Yin Nuashing's eyes flickered slightly. The 7 elements in the elemental stone were the 7 elements that existed when the realm of the gods was first born. They were the purest and the strongest. They were countless times purer than the elements that existed in the realm of the gods now. It was a pity that no one could touch this power, not even the gods. However, he was not one of them. The 10 elements in his body now were equivalent to the 10 elements that were first born in the realm of the gods during the mythological era. He had evolved them through the use of the elemental stone in the past, and later passed them on to himself. Yin Nuashing fixed the colorful river on the ground. He looked at the bottomless abyss and shook his head. He didn't know how long it would take for the energy of the elemental stone to heal the scars of this huge pit. The residual energy here was still terrifying. It would take a long time for the elemental stone to neutralize it. He didn't have the time to wait here and slowly heal it. He could only leave a trace and let the elemental stone fill it up by itself. Cough. Yin Nuashing's face turned pale. He coughed softly, panted, and laughed bitterly. Was it so tiring to use a little bit of the godly right power? It actually consumed a lot of his spiritual energy and soul energy. It's too much for my body to use the godly right power now. A part of my spiritual energy and soul are automatically consumed to resist the recoil effect of using the godly right power. It must be very uncomfortable, right? Zai sighed and closed the book. She lay on the bed and rolled the blanket over herself. She looked at the sky above the spiritual world and said, "It's better not to force it. It's fine. It's only once or twice. There aren't many chances to use the godly right power. I can't use it in battle either. As for the recoil, I just need to rest a little. It's not a big deal." Yin Nuashing shook his head. He didn't really care. The godly right power was mostly used to control and manipulate things. It could also be used to exert pressure. It was quite weak in battle. Zi sighed and did not continue speaking. In any case, there was an 80% chance that this idiot would not listen to her, even if she spoke. Why bother making things difficult for herself? Looking at the long, colorful river that had stabilized and poured into the elemental abyss, Yin Nuashing sighed and rubbed his forehead. Many things in the past came rushing into his mind. He was a little irritated. He shook his head and wanted to throw all these things away. But when he closed his eyes, they would appear in front of him again. The past was vivid in his mind. "Brother Nuashing, why don't you rest a little?" Lon Xian felt the change in his state of mind and said with a little heartache. Yin Nuashing nodded and returned to the fire phoenix. With a wave of his hand, the fire phoenix flew back to its original path. He looked at the people who were still cultivating on the fire phoenix and sighed. Seeing that Xian and the others were safe, he lay down. "Yes, just a little rest. In 2 days, I still have to deal with the Pillar of Creation. In a few days, I will go to Yanli Academy to deal with the Trial of Fire." After that, his voice became softer and softer. As he spoke, he stopped talking. The Thousand Dreams mantra automatically activated, and he entered a state of light sleep. Zai and the others were stunned. This guy fell asleep while talking, and he said that the recoil wasn't serious. His spiritual energy was almost depleted. As an enlightened god who had lost his enlightened god status, he was half immortal. At this time, he was forcefully using the godly right power of the enlightened god level. Everyone knew that this was a matter of life and death. He was dancing on the edge of a knife. With a thought, Lon Xian came out of the spiritual world. This was the first time she had come to the real world after gaining a physical body. In the past, she had been hiding in Yun Nuashing's spiritual world. Mei Mao shook her head, and her waist-length hair swayed. Lon Xian was a little stunned. She raised her hand and pinched it. Then, she pressed her hand to her chest and listened to the sound of her heartbeat. She couldn't help but feel a little intoxicated. She hadn't felt a physical body for a very, very long time. That long period of time was even longer than the time when Zai waited for Yun Nuashing. She was a remnant soul that had been passed down from the mythological era. She was the oldest existence in their group. However, the others subconsciously ignored this point. They didn't want her to feel sad because she was out of tune with this era. Looking at Yun Nuashing, who was curled up into a ball on the fire phoenix, Mei Mao felt a surge of warmth in her heart. She slowly lay down and reached out to hug him. She whispered softly, "Brother Nuashing, thank you." She had a lot of things to say. However, she couldn't say them in front of Yun Nuashing. She could only take advantage of the time when he was sleeping to say a few words. Now they were all cultivating. Her brother Nuashing was alone. At least for now, she could monopolize her brother Nuashing in this short period of time. When Zai heard this, he couldn't help but sigh and shake his head. Silly girl, silly girl. He couldn't let go of the past. She couldn't let go of the past either. Instead, she hung her feelings on him. She would hang her feelings on him for the rest of her life. Zai shook his head helplessly. Really, both of them were so casual. Chapter 10:23. In the Blazing Flame Academy, loud sounds of bells and drums reverberated throughout the vast academy. It had already reverberated for a full 15 minutes, with 8 different tones ringing at the same time, without stopping. The mountain peak outside the Blazing Cloud secret territory was especially lively. Students in fiery red uniforms gathered there, looking forward to seeing who the person who had bravely passed the Golden Trial was. Today might be the busiest day in the Cloud Fire Secret Land. Lu Feng floated in the air above the mountain peak. A green whirlwind blew at his robes. His long hair draped down, covering his half-zhong-long face. The other half of his face was exceptionally delicate and pretty. It was the Wind God Hall elder that they had met when they came from Yun Nua. Oh, will Son of God be able to pass the 7th test? The last time he was here, he was only at the demon level. This time, he is close to the beginner god level. There shouldn't be a problem, right? Beside him, Yang Yi crossed his arms and looked at the Cloud Fire Secret Land. However, he couldn't see anything. I don't know. Lu Feng shook his head. They still didn't know that Yun Nuashing had regained her identity. Only the higher-ups in the 9 Deities Hall knew about Yun Nuashing's identity. Hence, they still addressed him as Son of God. The bell and drum have been ringing for almost half an hour. Why hasn't it stopped? It can't be that he can't even pass this test. Son of God passed it very quickly the last time. Yang Yi scratched his head. The ringing of the bell and drum had attracted more than half of the students in the Yanli College. Wong. Suddenly, a huge flaming tornado rushed into the sky and mixed with the clouds. The sky was dyed red. Faintly, there seemed to be an earth-shattering roar. However, it wasn't clear. Everyone only noticed that the huge flaming pillar was extremely terrifying. The dense fire element had spread to the mountain peak and was still spreading rapidly to other places. The density of the fire element in the heaven and earth increased rapidly, causing the other elements to flee in fear. Son of God won. The Lord of Flames was defeated and seemed to have suffered serious injuries. When Lefeng heard the voice inside, he squinted his eyes and smiled faintly. They had all been to the Cloudfire secret land and fought with the Flame Overlord. It wasn't very strong, but it was an abnormally difficult fellow to deal with. With the natural advantage of the lava sea, it could exhaust a heavenly god to death. Yang Yi nodded before frowning. So the bell and drum are broken? Why hasn't it stopped yet? Lu Feng said. Well, I guess the power of the divine child hasn't dissipated yet. It's still echoing in front of the 8 drums. But it's not a big problem. Look, the little guys are all sitting down to cultivate. He pointed to the mountain peak below. Yang Yi turned his gaze and saw a group of students sitting cross-legged in cultivation, listening to the sound of the bell and drum. They seemed to have gained some special insights. These flaming drums contain the will of the fire element. Just by listening to the reverberations, they would be able to benefit immensely. At this moment, the 8 drums were ringing for a long time without dissipating. This was an extremely rare condition. If they didn't cultivate now, then when? It was also for this reason that when Yun Nuoxing came out from the 5 chains, she saw a group of people sitting cross-legged on the ground with fire elements surging around them. She couldn't help but be stunned and scratch her head. What's going on? Godchild. Lu Feng and Yang Yi hurriedly came down and cupped their hands. The former smiled and said, Congratulations, Godchild, for passing the 7th level. Oh, thank you. It's just that I accidentally passed the 8th and 9th level. The 9th level is still a bit messy. Can you guys go and fix it? Yin Nuoxing scratched his head and laughed dryly. Lu Feng and Yang Yi widened their eyes. The 8th level required the strength of an enlightened god, while the 9th level required the strength of a netherworld king. They hadn't passed the first 2 levels. Although they were also enlightened gods, the 8th level was extremely difficult. If they couldn't comprehend a trace of creativity from the flames, or rather, creativity, they couldn't pass. Yin Nuoxing smiled faintly. The 8th level required them to comprehend the creativity of the elements. This wasn't difficult for him. He could even create the world, let alone this level. As for the 9th level, the Netherworld King elite guarding the level was a little powerful. Under the situation where he couldn't use his divine weapon, he had to contend with him for a long time before killing him. However, these didn't need to be said in detail. He waved his hand and said, Well, that's it. Half of the trial of fire has been completed. The purpose of coming to the Flamely Academy has also been achieved. It's time to leave. There's not much time left. Lu Feng and Yang Yi trembled and then came back to their senses. They looked at each other and didn't say anything. Sighing, they cupped their hands at Yin Nuoxing and said, Then we wish Godchild a safe journey. As for what he was busy with and what he was rushing about for, it wasn't something they should ask. When they arrived this morning, his travel-worn appearance had scared them. He really rushed over, stayed here for 2 hours, and left again. Yes, he really left in the blink of an eye. In the end, they only saw him waving his hand, and then he was gone. Phew, another matter has been settled. High up in the sky, Yun Nuoxing stretched on the back of the Fire Phoenix. The Fire Phoenix continued to move towards the next destination. He turned around and looked at everyone. This was already a habit. Every time he returned to the Fire Phoenix, he would look at them to see if there was anything wrong. Fortunately, nothing out of the ordinary happened. The origin pillars of the Ganyuan region are still missing 4. Let's work harder. Patting his cheeks with both hands, Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath and grinned. He tilted his head and looked at the Flamely Academy that was no longer in sight. His eyes flickered slightly, and he slightly remembered the group of people he knew in the Farlight Academy. He wondered how they were doing now. Well, whether it's Lin Sheng, Ding Mengyu, or Luo, Yi, and the others, none of them are simple people. They should be doing well now. Yin Nuoxing smiled silently. The divine world was huge. Although the divine lands had the word small in its name, its area was equivalent to the origin region, or even bigger. This was not small at all. Even a god would have to spend a lot of time to travel through the entire origin region. It was not easy to meet up with them. Let's leave it to fate. Achoo! Lin Sheng sneezed loudly without any warning, causing everyone around him to be shocked and cast a strange look at him. Lin Sheng's handsome face had a blank look on it. Puzzled, he tugged at the blue hairband tied around his temples and muttered, "Who's talking about me?" "Who knows?" Ding Mingyu shrugged, her hair swaying in the wind. Mei Mao narrowed her eyes and pinched his waist. "I'm afraid it's one of your little lovers who's thinking about you." Lin Sheng trembled. Seeing her half smile, he could not help but shake his head with a bitter smile. What little lover? Everyone spread their hands and threw him a look that said, "Good luck." Then they turned their gazes. What appeared in front of them was a huge circular energy barrier. They did not know how big it was. Standing in front of it, they felt like they could see another piece of land lying in front of them. Its height and width were astronomical figures. The black barrier flowed with an ominous light. The dark light was like flowing ink, emitting an energy that made everyone's heart palpitate. The dark elemental barrier. Here, there's the smell of that power. Jun Luoyi raised her eyebrows slightly. She could smell the chaotic and terrifying aura from a distance. The power that disturbed the rules made her heart throb for no reason. It was many times stronger than the power of the void beasts in the Five Elements realm. This was the true power of the dark elemental. At this time, they were at the border between the western region of the Divine Prefecture and the northern wilderness. 10,000 miles behind them, there was a city called Linhai City. It was said to be close to the sea, but there was no place that could be called an ocean nearby. There was only a black barrier 10,000 miles away. Looking at the dark elemental barrier from 10,000 miles away, it looked like a black sun was slowly rising from the horizon. The ominous black barrier eroded the pure white sunlight and dyed it black. When the sunlight fell on the ground nearby, it could be seen for a long time. It's not easy to come to the Divine Prefecture. Are we just passing by? Elder Yin Feng, can't we go out and play? Xueling Feng leaned on the edge of the airship and could not help but sigh. Yin Feng rolled his eyes. If we want to play, we'll leave you behind. Forget it. Everyone smiled bitterly. It was the first time for most of them to come to the Divine Prefecture, which was known as the center of the God realm. Lin Sheng smiled silently and could not help but tilt his head. At the far end of the land, there were huge black metal pillars erected. They looked like pillars that supported the heavens and the earth, covering the entire land. This thing had appeared for some time, but not everyone around them could see it. Only Ding Mingyu, Jun Luoyi, and Chuan Mu could see it. The only thing they had in common was that they seemed to have seen this pillar of creation before. The soul seed in their minds was still there. Originally, they wanted to ask Yin Nuoxing about the pillar of creation that had suddenly appeared. However, when they thought about how busy that busy person was in the realm of the gods, they didn't want to disturb him. Since he didn't say anything, it probably wouldn't be a problem. The airship gradually approached the dark elemental barrier. Everyone was less than 100 feet away from it. The ominous black aura was very close to them. The crazy aura blew past them like a gust of wind, sending chills down their spines. They looked at the barrier that seemed to be right in front of them with fear. It was like a black hole. The surrounding light was getting dimmer and dimmer. Even though the sun was hanging above their heads, the sunlight could not illuminate this place. It was as if they were constantly moving towards a black hole. They could only feel the darkness gradually swallowing their world. If we stay in this place for too long, we will definitely get sick. No one knew who said this, but everyone agreed. They did not want to come to this place just by looking at it. If they did not need to pass through this place to go to the small divine lands, they really would not want to come. In front of the dark elemental barrier was a river that was 100 feet wide. It circled around the barrier. No one knew where its source was. After circling around the entire small divine lands, it would converge into the Eastern Sea. Yin Feng had been here a few times, and he couldn't help but sigh. He had fought in the small divine prefecture before, but he wasn't the most outstanding one, and there weren't any big waves either. He had fought in the small divine prefecture for thousands of years, and when he felt tired, he came out of the small divine prefecture. Those thousands of years felt like a lifetime, and when he returned to the Nine Deities Palace, he actually couldn't get used to the peaceful pace of the small divine prefecture, and in the end, he inexplicably came to the Far Light Academy to become an elder. "Sai, we are still young." Yin Feng sighed. He turned around and saw the complicated emotions in the crowd. He could not help but narrow his eyes and remind them in a deep voice, "You are all the most outstanding students of the Far Light Academy. This time, you're going to the small divine lands, representing yourselves and the Far Light Academy. It is definitely not a fun place. You will only experience a more tense atmosphere than the God Realm. At the same time, you will also encounter more dangerous situations. Always remember, strength is king. Do not let your enemies survive in there, because everyone can grow at an unimaginable speed in there. Leaving your enemies alive will only leave behind a huge hidden danger. Once you cross this place, you will bid farewell to the relatively peaceful life in the God Realm. Are you mentally prepared?" After Yin Feng finished speaking, he took a deep breath. There was a cruel competition in the God world, and everyone was a competitor. However, this place was relatively peaceful, and the cruelty was like a sandwich biscuit. However, in the small divine lands, there was no such thing as gentleness, only more intense competition. A difference of 1 month was enough to make everyone feel that the world had turned upside down. Lin Sheng and the others swallowed their saliva, looked at each other, and nodded solemnly. "We are ready." Yin Feng also nodded. "Very good. You have the Far Light Academy's token, so you will receive the support of the Nine Shrine. If you encounter any difficulties that you cannot overcome, go and find them. This is nothing to be embarrassed about. The Far Light Academy belongs to the Nine Shrine, so we will not be stingy with helping any student. If you encounter difficulties and cannot bring yourself to ask for help, you will have to pay the most painful price." Everyone nodded. Only then did Yin Feng wave his hand and take out the holy objects one by one. He said, "There are 50 of you on this trip, so 4 holy objects will be enough. After the door opens, these holy objects will be given to you. I heard that the primordial holy objects have some special uses, but I am not too sure. You can study them in the small divine lands." Finished speaking, Yin Feng waved his hand, and the 4 holy objects touched the dark elemental barrier that was less than 5 zhang away. Everyone opened their eyes nervously and stared at this scene. Ding! When the holy objects touched the dark elemental barrier, a crisp sound like a crystal being flicked lightly rang out. The 4 holy objects all lit up, and 4 rays of light shot out from the holy objects and entered the dark elemental barrier. The latter seemed to be released and suddenly began to riot. However, just as it showed signs of rioting, an even stronger force tightly restrained it. Only 1 or 2 strands of dark elemental energy floated out and slowly condensed into a human figure in the air. Black hair, black eyes, a mysterious black armor, a handsome face that was indifferent and resolute. Pang Linsheng and the others had seen this face before, but the one they had seen was gentler and more gentle. He looked more like a girl than a girl. "Oh, and it was a cross-dresser. Mr. Yun, Jun Luo," he exclaimed softly. The person in front of them seemed to be that person, but also not that person. At least, it did not look like that person now. Yin Feng was also a little surprised. He had been here a few times, but he had never seen such a strange scene. A shadow actually appeared. The dark elemental barrier that encompassed the small divine land was set up by Quarter Moon. He had left a trace of his soul energy here. When the barrier was about to collapse, he would appear and inform him. However, at this time, there did not seem to be any threat approaching. The shadow of the crescent moon appeared. His black eyes first swept across the crowd before turning away without any ripples. He seemed to have sensed something and raised his head to look at the sky. He stretched out his hand and pointed upwards. He seemed to have seen many things with that one glance. The scene of stars being destroyed flashed across his eyes. No one knew what he had seen. They gulped and wisely shut their mouths. They knew that the person in front of them was not the person they knew. Oh no, insufficient energy output, pillar of creation. He opened his mouth and murmured something. It was the language of the Taishang era. No one could understand this language, but somehow they understood it. They were all stunned. After a moment, they pressed their heads in realization. That was the communication of the mind of the soul, directly transmitting the message that he wanted to say. Even if they couldn't understand it, they could understand what it meant. The others did not think much of it. However, those who knew about the pillar of creation, such as Yin Feng and Lin Sheng, felt their hearts skip a beat. The pillar of creation, they knew that it was a pillar that was closely related to the realm of the gods. Could it be that there was a problem? However, that was all Quartermoon's shadow said. He then lowered his head and looked at everyone. His eyes flashed with an unfathomable light. He said coldly, "The fated ones, go to the central area." As soon as the voice fell, the shadow of the crescent moon quietly disappeared. What appeared next was an azure space gate that was 20 feet tall. It was unknown what was behind it, but based on what it said, the central area should be the center of the small divine lands. Lin Sheng and the others were a little stunned. The fated ones, was it referring to them? Was it because of Yin Nuashing? Oh, go in when you're ready. Yin Feng was the first to come back to his senses. He waved his hand and broke everyone's dazed state. He turned to the side and pointed at the spatial gate. That's all I have to say. It's better to go there personally than to say more. That wonderful world has already opened its doors to you. Lin Sheng and the others trembled as they came back to their senses. They looked at each other and nodded. With a wave of their hands, they took the 4 sacred objects. Then, they cupped their hands at Yin Feng and said in unison, "Elder, we'll be off then. Go, go." Yin Feng smiled and waved his hand. Lin Sheng and the others nodded and jumped off the flying ship first. They plunged into the spatial gate. Behind them, the group quickly followed. After the students had all jumped off the flying ship and the spatial gate slowly closed, Yin Feng sighed softly and waved his hand. He left with the flying ship. Far away in the Ganyuan region, Yin Nuashing suddenly felt his heart palpitate for no reason. He opened his eyes and jumped up. Lan Xine, who was hugging him, was shocked. She quickly looked around and didn't find anything out of the ordinary. She looked at him in a daze. "Brother Nuashing?" Yin Nuashing came back to his senses and saw Lan Xine looking at him innocently. He couldn't help but smile apologetically. "Ugh, I didn't know you were coming out. Did you bump into anything?" Lan Xine shook her head. "What's wrong?" Yin Nuashing frowned and shook his head blankly. "I don't know. I suddenly felt my heart palpitate. I heard a voice. It was my own voice. It said something about insufficient energy. The sudden palpitating made him feel that something big was about to happen. He didn't know how many years it had been since he had felt this way. He didn't feel this way even when he was about to die." Chapter 10:24. Yin Nuashing could not figure out which part of him this voice came from. Back then, he had left a part of his will in the Pantheon realm as a warning. However, he had forgotten where he had left it and why he had left it there. The fact that he had left his will as a warning instead of sealing it meant that the place he had left it there might not be as dangerous as he had imagined. Either that, or it was a relatively important place, and he had left it there as a matter of convenience. It was as convenient as having breakfast. No one would have such a good memory to remember what they had in the morning 70 trillion years ago. The will that he had left behind at that time contained a portion of the god's power. It could observe everything in the world when necessary. If it had discovered something life-threatening, it would have passed on the necessary actions and reactions to his main body. However, it had been too long, and he had not passed on this last step. In the end, he had only said something about insufficient energy. What exactly was insufficient energy? A barrier? A magic array? He could not remember. He had left a part of this behind. How could it have nothing to do with energy? Yin Nuashing scratched his eyebrows in distress. He had just been in a light sleep, and his consciousness was somewhat blurry. Fortunately, he had not been dreaming. If it had been someone else, they would have probably treated it as a vague thought in a dream and ignored it. So what exactly is insufficient energy? What exactly did I say just now? Yin Nuashing was a little anxious. Bell must have seen something life-threatening. Otherwise, it would not have sent back a message. However, he had no idea what he had said. Yin Nuashing tugged at his long hair, and Lan Xen was tidying up his messy hair behind him. Feeling the movement behind him, Yin Nuashing thought for a while and did not want to cause trouble. He stared at the sky with his eyes wide open. Thanks to this incident, he was not sleepy at all. Since he had nothing to do, he could only take out the Book of Epochs and try to trace the short message he had just received. He wanted to see where it had come from, although he might not be able to figure out what it was trying to remind him of. After tidying up his long, colorful hair and putting on the soul-stabilizing bracelet, Lan Xen nodded in satisfaction. She looked at Yin Nuashing and said, "Don't you want to sleep a little longer?" "I want to sleep." Yin Nuashing sighed and shook his head. "Just now, the will I left behind triggered a warning. It even sent back a message to me, indicating that something big had happened. However, I have no idea what exactly had happened. If it was an ordinary matter, it would not send a message to me. At most, it would send a warning to those who triggered it, and then leave it be." Lan Xen listened to him and smiled faintly. She hugged him and ruffled his hair. She smiled and said, "Brother Nuashing, you're always thinking about a lot of things." Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes and automatically ignored the softness at the back of his head. He sighed and said, "It is not that I want to think about it, but I have to think about it. The burden that I bear, many things are pushing me forward." "Hey, Xen, do you know that the Pillar of Creation has chosen me as a maintenance worker? From a certain perspective, I am the guardian of the realm of the gods. I can represent the entire realm of the gods because of the Pillar of Creation. They are one with the realm of the gods, and they are the pillars of this world. They're also emotionless. They only want me to protect the realm of the gods. Everything on the realm of the gods is worthless ants that can be abandoned. This position is not as easy as you think. The Guardian Circle is also a destructive circle. It has the power to destroy all life in the realm of the gods. It is also because the Pillar of Creation itself has this power. Even without the Guardian Circle, I can use the power of the Pillar of Creation to cleanse the entire realm of the gods. When you have such a dangerous power in your hands, every move you make will affect the survival of this world. I don't really care about the weight of this burden. I have killed trillions of people, but it is necessary. I don't like meaningless slaughter." Yin Nuashing let out a sigh as he spoke. Once upon a time, the warnings from the wills were of the same level as what I just said. They would only send back information of extreme danger that we must pay attention to. But the realm of gods is so big that I have forgotten how many wills I left behind. Where are they? What do they sense? What kind of danger? That was just now. Ugh, I can't eat or sleep well. Yin Nuashing was so troubled that his eyebrows were pinched together. He was shouldering the responsibility of protecting the realm of the gods. He could not just leave it alone. He had to consider all threats. Lan Xen nodded. She understood, but she didn't say anything. She just listened to him quietly, caressing his hair and face. Yin Nuashing mumbled and didn't say anything. He sighed and accepted his fate. He continued to use the Book of Epochs to search for possible situations. Who asked him to take on such a dangerous responsibility? Protecting the realm of the gods. Ordinary people wouldn't even dare to think about it. After some time, Lan Xen shook Yin Nuashing in her arms and said softly, "Brother Nuashing, we are here." Yin Nuashing opened his eyes. They were at the location of the next Pillar of Creation. It was the fourth origin pillar from the Ganyuan region. His eyes flickered for a moment, and he muttered to himself, "Maybe I can use the Pillar of Creation to check it out?" When Lon Xen heard this, she shook her head helplessly. Brother Nuashin's mind was probably unable to rest all day long, especially when something happened. Even if he was already very tired, he would still shout for rest while fighting with red eyes. In the hiding place of the Pillar of Creation, Yin Nuashin quickly solved the problem of the origin pillar. It was actually just a routine check, and he also strengthened the seal of the light element. Fortunately, the problem with this origin pillar was not serious. So far, he had only found one origin pillar with a severely distorted formation at the bottom. As for the Source Peak region and the Ganyuan region, he was not sure yet. It seemed that the realm of the gods had been quite peaceful in the past few dozen epochs. There were no major disturbances that affected the realm of the gods. Creation, space, self-examination. Yin Nuashing pressed his palm on the Pillar of Creation and chanted. Then, a ray of light shot out from the Pillar of Creation. Dozens of tiny rays of light shot out from the Pillar of Creation and gathered in front of him to weave a huge three-dimensional map that was about 10 feet in size. It was made up of colorful rays of light, and it looked like the realm of the gods. On the ground, there were many huge pillars that extended into the sky. Those were the Pillars of Creation. They were taller than expected. According to the scale on the map, their height was about 1/3 of the length of the realm of the gods. It really extended into the Ganyuan region, but it was still within the realm of the gods. So this is what the realm of the gods looks like. This is the first time I've seen the realm of the gods in its entirety. Lon Xine bent down to look at the map of the realm of the gods. It was only 60 feet in length and width, and it had been shrunk countless times. The map was very detailed, and there were many black dots that were smaller than sesame seeds on the map. They covered the entire realm of the gods. Those were cities, and compared to the entire realm of the gods, they were smaller than dust. Brother Nuashing, how big is the realm of the gods? Lon Xen tugged at his sleeve and asked curiously. Since ancient times, people had always said that the realm of the gods was very, very big. But how big was it? Is there a specific number? There's a rough number. I checked it once in the ancient age, but this number is too big. It's so big that it's meaningless. This is the result of the Pillar of Creation measuring this world. It's more accurate than the data of any divine god. As Yin Nuashing spoke, he smiled mysteriously and said, "Before I reveal the answer, I want to ask you something. Do you know how big the other worlds and planets that you know or have heard of are?" "I don't know." Lon Xian shook her head. She didn't even know how big her own world was. How could she know how big the other worlds were? She had never been out. Yin Nuashing. This answer was somewhat beyond his expectations, and he almost couldn't continue the conversation. Okay. Before I reveal the final answer, I'll talk about some unimportant digressions. Yin Nuashing coughed dryly. Lon Xiner and Mei Mao's eyes shone with interest. They nodded and listened attentively. Other than the realm of the gods, there are other planets in the starry sky. They are different from the realm of the gods. They are spherical worlds called planets. A big planet can nurture tens of billions of lives. Of course, there are also flat worlds in the starry sky that are similar to the realm of the gods. Those are rarer, and they are man-made. They are more special, and they need strong rules to add normal living conditions to these special worlds. Yin Nuashing shook his finger and said, "Ordinary living stars are between 20,000 miles to 300,000 miles in both length and width. The special living stars might be larger. Affected by the ascenders in the living stars would send down layers of beneficial natural laws, making the natural laws in the living stars more powerful. Perhaps the living stars would become even larger." "What is an ascender?" Lon Xian raised her hand and asked. "The life form that ascends to the level of God's spirit is called an ascender," Yin Nuashing explained. "After ascending to the level of God's spirit, every level up is an ascender. Every ascender will give powerful rules to the planet where the ascender is located. These rules can be activated with a little effort, and you can throw them back to the planet where you are located." hundreds of thousands of miles. The Divine Sky City seems to be close to 1,000,000 miles in length and width, right? Lon Xiner nodded. In terms of size, an ordinary planet with life was actually not as big as a big city. Most of the medium-sized cities were 300 to 400,000 miles in length and width, and the small ones were not less than 200,000 miles in length and width. The realm of the gods is special. The cities in other planets with life are not so exaggerated in size. Yin Nuashing coughed dryly. The twinkling stars in the star region are the starlight that we see every night. Most of them are suns, which are stars. They are fireworks that cover the entire star region. I once said that I admire the loneliest fireworks in the world the most. Ahem, the size of a planet can be tens of millions of miles or even tens of billions of miles. There are also bigger ones. As Yin Nuashing spoke, he waved his hand and a fist-sized sun appeared in the middle of his palm. It did not emit any light or heat. It was just a reflection. He waved his hand again, and countless stars appeared. They gathered together and formed a huge aggregate. If the city was the settlement of the human race and other races, then what appeared in his hand was the settlement of thousands of stars. This is a galaxy, a big family formed by countless stars and planets with life. Some galaxies are especially bright in the night sky. There are also a few special ones that can be reflected in the night sky of the realm of the gods, even though they are separated by a certain distance. As he spoke, he hung all the galaxies and planets above the 600 feet large map of the realm of the gods. In comparison, they were many times smaller than the realm of the gods. It is difficult to describe the span of the galaxies clearly. It is possible to use numbers, but it is difficult to measure the distance with one's senses. Let's pick two galaxies that are closest to the realm of the gods. They are hundreds of thousands of light years apart. Yin Nuashing pinched two oval-shaped objects with his hands. They were much bigger than those small objects just now. He let them float above the realm of the gods. They seemed to be of a certain size. They seemed to be 1/10 of the size of the realm of the gods. Lon Xian looked at the smallest fireworks in the starry sky. She looked bigger and bigger. Finally, she fixed her gaze on the huge realm of the gods. She was stunned. She did not expect a place with life to be so big. And then, how big is the realm of the gods? It is about 6 million light years long. Yin Nuashing scratched his head. This is the data obtained from the Pillar of Creation. You just have to make do with it. There is no need to find out how big it is. You just need to know that it is very big. Moreover, this is the data of this era. Because of the great Samsara, a part of the realm of the gods seemed to have been destroyed. Those were places that were not protected by the Pillar of Creation. Now, the remaining 6 million light years are quite stable. At the end of his words, he spread his hands helplessly. The realm of the gods was so big that there was no end to it. The first-generation great deity who created this magical world had left behind countless extremely powerful forbidden spells in the space of this world. This allowed the realm of the gods to see the sun rise in the east and set in the west for 24 hours a day. This was also the measurement of time in the Great Yuan realm. It sounded quite incredible that such a big world could maintain this speed every day. However, this was the product of the first-generation great deity. It was their work. What could they do about it? A part of it was destroyed by the explosion. Lon Xian could not help but exclaim. Yin Nuashing nodded. He calculated in his heart and said, in the ancient age, the length was probably 5 times this number. Lon Xian was speechless. Large-scale travel is the job of high-level gods. If ordinary people want to travel across space, they could just look for a portal. This is strange. Anyway, our speed is fast. We can fly wherever we go. Yin Nuashing spread his hands. In general, such a large distance does not affect the normal lives of the people in the realm of the gods. Ordinary people live in a city. There are mountains, rivers, and rivers. They basically do not need to go out. The slightly stronger cultivators go to and from 1 or 2 cities. The stronger cultivators are, the more they come into contact with the realm of the gods. Ordinary underworld kings would need half a month to fly 1 light year, but tearing through space can allow them to cross tens or hundreds of light years in an instant. God emperors can even tear through space to cross tens of thousands of light years without a problem. Take me, for example. I can travel in the void and reduce the distance to 100 millionth. Oh, I can't do that right now because I'm not strong enough. I can only reduce the distance by 10,000th. In addition to my own light element and various methods to reduce distance and increase speed, I can go anywhere in this world. There are also no restrictions on the teleportation gate. It won't be a problem for me to teleport directly from the far west to the far east as long as the teleportation gate's array is sturdy enough and precise enough. Lon Xin was speechless again. What kind of magical existence is this? Yin Nuoxing suddenly fell silent. He waved his hand and made the stars disappear. His eyes focused on the realm of the gods. He scanned the whole area. Then, he frowned and tilted his head in confusion. Lon Xin saw this and quickly asked, "What's wrong?" "Well," Yin Nuoxing sighed gloomily. He said helplessly, "The Pillar of Creation did not find any problems. At least, the Pillar of Creation has not found anything that can threaten this world. The fragment far away from this world does not count. That will be blocked by the barrier of creation. That is the most powerful barrier of the Pillar of Creation. Logically speaking, it should be a good thing that he didn't discover the problem. However, there was a prerequisite. He had already received a short warning. If he still couldn't discover the problem now, then things would get worse. The deeper the threat was hidden, the more deadly it would be when it exploded. Brother Nuoxing, look here!" Lon Xin suddenly exclaimed and pointed to a place. Yin Nuoxing turned around and looked. It was the northern wasteland towards the north. There was a vertical vortex in the space. It was twisting and seemed to be absorbing all the energy in a large area. Because the map here was woven with colored lines, the specific color of the vortex was not known. Therefore, they did not know what the vortex was for. Yin Nuoxing thought for a while and understood. "Oh, that. It is the demon world. Look at the way the space there is twisting and breaking. It is probably coming out. You can't see this in the realm of the gods. Only the Pillar of Creation can sense that something is wrong." Lon Xin thought of something and said, "The realm of the gods. Is the demon world a part of the realm of the gods? If it is, then won't the size of the realm of the gods continue to expand?" Yin Nuoxing paused for a moment, then shook his head. "Not really, but should be a part of it. The demon realm was originally a space adjacent to the god realm, and so was the demon realm. The only difference is that the demon realm was created by the demon race. But the demon realm is an incomplete world that was nurtured by the heavens and earth. It's not considered a space of the god realm, but it's also an inseparable part of the god realm. There's a spatial barrier between the two realms. It's hard, but it can be broken by the combined power of hundreds of god emperors. Sometimes it's weak, but sometimes it's so strong that even gods can't tear it apart. It's strange, but this is also the reason why the war of the two realms can't continue. The spatial barrier between the two realms will be sealed, and the demons who are left alone in the god realm will either hide themselves and pretend to be good people and live on, or be killed. The realm of the gods is like the realm of the gods. It is just that the demon world is bigger and more complete. Because the rules there are similar, but generally different from the realm of the gods. There's a different kind of life form. Because it is very similar to the realm of the gods, it is also called the demon race. In the past, they were not called the demon race. However, as they were called, it was passed down. It became the demon race that we know today. Yin Nuoxing said, I know. Lon Xin raised her hand and said excitedly, "In my era, there was news about this. The demon race was originally called the ancient royal family. I don't know when they changed their name." Yin Nuoxing scratched her cheek and spread her hands. "Anyway, that is the general situation." Chapter 1025. Yin Nuashing used the Pillar of Creation to inspect the Pantheon world thoroughly. He even expanded the scope of his inspection to the star regions surrounding the Pantheon world. He also checked the 2 moons and the 2 suns, but he did not find anything amiss. Yin Nuashing could not help but let out a long sigh. He felt that his obsessive-compulsive disorder was driving him to his death. He pulled his hair in distress. This was really driving him to his death. Hey, I don't believe that if I can't find it today, I will. Before Yin Nuashing could finish his sentence, Lan Xner, who was sitting in midair and feeling bored, jumped up. She quickly reached out to cover his mouth and said excitedly, "Brother Nuashing, even if you are blessed by the providence of heaven and earth, you shouldn't say such dangerous things." Yin Nuashing, reality proved that this little girl's hint was very useful. He searched for a whole 6 hours, and the veins in his eyes were about to pop out. He couldn't even recognize the realm of the gods anymore, and he couldn't find anything out of the ordinary. Ugh. Yin Nuashing breathed a long sigh of relief. He pulled his hair anxiously and felt that he was about to vomit out his soul. Lan Xen also let out a long yawn. She rubbed her eyes and looked helplessly at the model of the Pantheon world in front of her. The Pantheon world, which was made up of colorful lines, was originally a normal flat plate. Now, it had been divided into hundreds of parts, and many hidden inner spaces had been dug out. The search was very thorough, but even so, the 2 of them still could not find anything amiss. Yin Nuashing was a little relieved that he did not say the first half of his sentence. He really could not find anything. Yin Nuashing waved his hand and restored the Pantheon world, which had been divided into hundreds of parts, to its original state. He let out a long sigh and said faintly, "Little girl, let's go." Lan Xian was already a little confused. When she heard this, she quickly stood up. Mei Mao's eyes flickered. "Not looking anymore? I can't find it. Forget it." Yin Nuashing's cheeks twitched. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She had already searched everywhere she could, and she wouldn't find anything special even if she continued searching. She could only give up. Anyway, she probably couldn't stop what was going to happen. She could only resign herself to fate. Forget it. If there really is a danger of that level, I will feel it in advance. Although it will take a lot less time to react compared to now, I should be able to handle it, or rather, he hoped that he could handle it. Lan Hexa mimicked him and shrugged her shoulders. After dealing with this origin pillar, Yin Nuashing sighed and waved her hand. She brought Lan Xian back to the Fire Phoenix and left the place. They continued to move towards the next origin pillar. More than 10 days later, the inspection of the last origin pillar in the Ganyuan region was completed. In a vast origin region, streaks of golden light burst out from the ground. It was a magnificent golden rain, but it was reversed. All the golden lights burst out from the ground and gathered in the sky. This magnificent scene shocked everyone in the Ganyuan region. Countless people looked up and saw the dense golden lights flying into the sky. They gathered in places that couldn't be seen by the naked eye, and there was a rumbling sound. Vaguely, one could hear the sound of rolling thunder. Something seemed to be forming in the sky. Buzz, buzz. In a hidden place where the Pillar of Creation was hidden, Yin Nuashing covered his long hair, which was fluttering in the wind. Together with Lan Shiner, he looked up at the golden rain gathering in the sky. Gradually, a huge and boundless magic formation appeared. An obscure wave spread rapidly in the void, disturbing the space. The revival of the Divine Sky formation is really big. Yin Nuashing couldn't help but sigh. This time, he couldn't hide it anymore. He could feel that this vast phenomenon was happening in the entire Ganyuan region. After that attack, the Divine Sky formation escaped into the ground of the Ganyuan region and was repairing itself. This might have something to do with its own nature. The other 4 Guardian formations didn't have such an ability. It was also because of its self-repair that Yun Nuo planet simply took out the rule fragments that had been automatically expelled to the edge of the magic formation, and the magic formation came back to life. The Great Primal Chaos magic formation and the Saint Soul magic formation had just come to life. They were still hidden in the void of the divine realm, absorbing all the energy to repair themselves. The divine royal heaven magic formation was already in a state where it could be used. In other words, if he didn't like the Ganyuan region, he could slap them right now. Forget it, forget it. Yin Nuashing waved his hand with a bitter smile. It was just a thought, and it was strangled to death before it even floated to the surface of his brain. He didn't have any problems with the Ganyuan region, so he didn't need to directly bombard them with the divine sky array. I think Brother Nuashing was thinking about something very scary just now, Lon Exer muttered, which made him smile even more bitterly. He did think of something very scary just now, the kind that ordinary people wouldn't dare to think about. Rumble, the sound of the space trembling, came from the sky. Her heart also trembled. This was the sound of the air trembling. She felt that the space seemed to be afraid of something, like a frightened small beast. She couldn't help but raise her head. She saw a huge golden formation. Just the outline of the formation's edge was already very far away, reaching the end of her line of sight. The huge golden formation was shining with a soul-stirring energy arc. All the energy in the world was jumping and swaying on the formation. The dazzling light was even more dazzling than the sun. The energy overflowing from the formation made her feel suffocated. This is the true Grand Guardian Array. When Yin Nuashing saw this, he couldn't help but chuckle. This was what the Guardian formation looked like when it was ready to attack. Lon Xin Er's jade hand trembled slightly. She quickly grabbed Yin Nuashing's hand and took a deep breath. Cold sweat slid down her forehead. Mei Mao stared at the formation. This was the Guardian formation. The energy that made one's heart palpitate was far beyond that of the gods. The power of the heavenly gods was pale and powerless in front of it. This is the power that represents the entire realm of the gods. This is the power of the will of the realm of the gods. Yin Nuashing licked his lips and smiled evilly. In a trance, he seemed to see that day again, the day when the Five Wheels Guardian formation attacked with all its might. All right, he admitted that he had a desire to destroy, and it wasn't a small one at that. Even the deity arts and profound arts that he cultivated were all extremely destructive and had a large area of effect. He was a walking combustible and explosive object. Wherever he went, he could blast a hole in the realm of the gods. Sensing Lon Xner's slightly strange gaze, Yin Nuashing hurriedly coughed dryly and straightened his face. With a wave of his hand, the terrifying formation in front of him gradually retreated into the void. The people outside could only see the rain of light dissipating, but they could not see the main body of the protective formation. However, such a grand phenomenon today would probably spread quickly throughout the entire realm of the gods. Perhaps some of the old monsters would be alarmed by the super strange phenomenon that occurred in the Dry Plain region. After settling the matters in the Ganyuan region, Yin Nuashing stretched his body. At this time, the Fire Phoenix was floating on the border between the Ganyuan region and the Ganyuan region. There was a huge mountain here that had been flattened by a sword. The mountain range was hundreds of thousands of feet long. There were a few large words written on it. The Ganyuan region border. That's really straightforward. Lon Xin looked at the words and shook her head speechlessly. The border between the Ganyuan region and the Ganyuan region was really too obvious. Oh, I really want to give myself a vacation. Yin Nuashing laid lazily on the Fire Phoenix and stretched his body. Lon Xin sat down and moved his head to her soft thighs. She rubbed his long hair and smiled. Brother Nuashing, what do you want to do when you have a vacation? Oh, Yin Nuashing pondered for a while and tilted his head. What should I do? The smile on Lon Xin's face froze. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry and shook her head. So he just wanted to rest, but he didn't think of what to do. However, the answer was probably eat, sleep, and watch the sunrise. Watch the sun in the morning, cultivate when you have nothing to do, make tea and watch the sun in the afternoon, and watch the stars at night. Yin Nuashing snapped his fingers and said with a smile, "See, that's the answer." Lon Xner smiled helplessly and changed the topic. It seems that we didn't stay in the Ganyuan region for long this time, because there was nothing else to do. We didn't go to any place that required us to stay for a long time. We just repaired the pillars of the origin and repaired the guardian formation. There was nothing else to do. When we were in the Ganyuan region, we went to the Geo Milky Way in the Spirit State City and made a scene in the Yin-Yang world. We also went to the Crazy Girl's hometown, the Celestial King Valley, and the Saint Spirit Miracle. These places took us a lot of time. Yin Nuashing said as he twirled his fingers. The Ganyuan region was very fast, so we didn't find any interesting places. Xian and the others were also cultivating, so we didn't go to any interesting places. So, the whole thing in the Ganyuan region was settled in less than a month. Lan Xener tilted her head. How long has it been since we came out of the Nine Deities Temple? Yun Nuashing calculated with her fingers and gave an accurate answer. 82 days, almost 3 months. Including the 1 month of rest in the Nine Deities Temple, there are still about 7 months before the demon world descends. This should be 90% accurate, so there won't be any delay if there are no accidents. Lan Xian spread her hands. Mei Mao glanced down. The Ganyuan region was full of mountains. Aside from the demon world, it was a paradise for monsters and demon beasts. The number of demon beasts and monsters living in this region accounted for 40% of the population in the heavenly realm. Of the remaining 60%, 40% were in the Eastern Sea, and the remaining 20% were scattered all over the heavenly realm. There were still many rare beasts hidden in the forests of the Ganyuan region. Perhaps they would find some demon beasts that were thought to be extinct but were actually still alive. Little Magic, who was lying on the side, was still sleeping. Since the fire phoenix quieted down, he didn't make much noise. Every day, he would lie beside Yin Nuashing. However, because the latter also used light sleep to travel, Little Magic also slept all day. Xiao Xian was about the same. Both of them had inherited Yin Nuashing's lazy personality and slept all day. Otherwise, why would people say that things take after their masters? Little Magic came out of the Ganyuan region, right? After many years, he somehow went to the Kuan Yuan region and was finally found in the Yin-Yang world. Lan Hexener said softly. Yin Nuashing nodded. Yes, the Book of Epics shows that this little guy did wake up in the Ganyuan region. Back then, he was sealed when he was still a cub. That's why he survived until this era unscathed. The stronger the existence, the weaker the sealing effect of the glazed crystal. The divine grade glazed crystal can seal all life forms except the gods. You're such a lazy bum. You're already at the door of your hometown, but you're still sleeping. Lan Xian stretched out her slender fingers and poked Little Magic's body. The latter's round body was very soft. When she poked it, she could feel its amazing elasticity. It was like a meatball. You sleep every day, just like your master. Yin Nuashing's head tilted, and he almost rolled down. He looked at Lan Xian who was smiling sweetly. Just say it. Why did he have to be implicated even when he was like this? Brother Nuashing, do you want to go to the Southern Ice World first, or directly to the Ganyuan region? Lan Xian winked at Mei Mao and asked with a smile. You still remember. Yin Nuashing scratched his head. At that time, he murmured something. He didn't expect her to remember it. He had said it on the platform on Heavenly Abyss. At that time, he had said that he wanted to go to the Southern Ice World. However, Yin Nuashing tilted his head. His eyes were filled with some sea blue. He looked into the distance and pondered. He frowned slightly. He saw something in the place that made his eyes dim and confused. In fact, going to the Southern Ice World was not something he wanted to do in this life. It was something Quarter Moon wanted to do, but she didn't have time to complete it. Wait a minute. Yin Nuashing shook his head and sat up. He flipped his palm and took out a device made of arrays. It was a round plate about 1 foot in diameter. The top part of the plate was bigger, and the bottom part was smaller. In the center of the plate, there was a dazzling ball, which was as dazzling as the sun. Even the device itself was sparkling with the purple color of the spirit essence star area. It was the astrolabe. Yin Nuashing had used it to predict the time when the demon world would descend. He had also predicted that something would happen in the near future. He had met a guy who would change his life completely. Turning the astrolabe with both hands, 5 extremely dim black rings appeared behind him, slowly revolving around him. Yin Nuashing closed his eyes. The astrolabe trembled slightly. Suddenly, thousands of tiny stars lit up above the astrolabe. The light was incomparably dazzling. Lan Xian stared at him without blinking. She quietly moved closer to him. About 10 minutes later, Yun Nuashing opened his eyes. The thousands of stars on the astrolabe dimmed down one by one. The sparks were extinguished, and the astrolabe returned to its original lightless state. Then he sighed and shook his head. The South Ice World. I can't go there for now. Forget it. I'll go to the extreme plain region. He had an ideal route in the past. After solving the problem in the dry plain region, he would wander around the South Ice World. Then, he would go to the extreme plain region. Then, he would go to the extreme plain region. Then, he would go to the extreme plain region to find Lu Li. After that, he would go to the Ice World's God Realm. Finally, he would go to the small divine land. After that, he would go to the demon world. He wanted to see what kind of earth-shaking things would happen in this life. Anyway, in his prediction, the storm that the demon world would stir up this time would not be small. Anyway, ideals are always beautiful. In reality, there are always many bumps and bruises. Even though we know that there is a situation, we still can't help but imagine the future. This is a common problem that is hard to change. Yin Nuashing shook his head and said self-mockingly. Lan Xian shrugged. Everyone wanted their script to develop according to the ideal situation. However, no matter how hard they tried, unexpected things would always happen. Even if the final result was achieved, the process would not be exactly the same. Yin Nuashing also sighed helplessly. He picked up little magic and put him on his head. He patted his tail that was swaying in front of him and sighed. Let's go, little guy. We're going back to our hometown. You have to come back to visit occasionally, right? Brother Nuashing said that he would bring Xian home to visit. How long has it been? Lan Xian mumbled. Cough, cough. Yin Nuashing choked and coughed crazily. He rolled his eyes and smiled bitterly. It has been a long time. I even said that I would bring her to Fengyin Mountain to retrieve the origin of fire. So many years have passed. In the end, we still haven't gone. We've been going around in circles in the realm of the gods. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Years ago, he said that he would go to Fengyin Mountain a long time ago. However, he received news that someone was attacking the forbidden land of elemental elements. In the end, he didn't go. Coincidentally, something happened in the ghoulish forest at that time. He also ran over to join in the fun. In short, this matter was delayed indefinitely. Now, it seemed that he had to make some arrangements. He couldn't keep delaying his promise to that girl. He wasn't a procrastinator. It was just that many things had happened along the way. Scratching his head, Yin Nuashing waved his hand and said, Let's not talk about anything else. Let's go to the realm of ultimate plane first. We just have to cross the huge mountain in front of us. The fire phoenix let out a loud and clear cry. It flapped its wings and flew towards the huge mountain. Even though they were in the sky, they didn't come from the mountain at all. Just as they crossed the huge mountain, Little White, who was leisurely lying down in Yin Nuashing's spiritual world, suddenly shivered. Its tiger fur stood on end. Its eyes suddenly opened. It jumped out of the spiritual world and landed in front of Yin Nuashing. Yin Nuashing was shocked when Little White suddenly rushed out from between her eyebrows. Before she and Lan Sheener could say anything, Little White transformed into a little boy who was only 3 meters tall. He had fluffy white hair and blue patterns on his face. A thoughtful look appeared on his handsome face. He gritted his teeth. What's wrong, Little White? Yin Nuashing tilted her head in confusion. She reached out and grabbed his tail. Little White swung his tail and slipped away from her hand. He snorted and scratched his fluffy long hair. He said, I feel the aura of the Azure Dragon. Oh, Little Blue, it's in the realm of ultimate plane? Yin Nuashing was startled for a moment, but he was not too surprised. This place was really suitable to be used as a nest for demonic beasts. He then nodded. Can you feel the specific place? Little White frowned and shook his head. I can only vaguely feel that it's in the west. I don't know where it is in the west. Also, it doesn't seem like the stupid housekeeper's aura. Oh, that slow and anxious aura, Little White mumbled. Before he could say anything, Yin Nuashing had a guess. Could it be Little Xian's aura? It's with Little Blue? Little White scratched his head and nodded. It seems like it. The two of them should have woken up earlier than me. They should have returned to the realm of ultimate plane. Could it be there? But that place has been destroyed. Oh, after pondering for a long time, Little White waved his hand and said, I'll come out for now. I'll tell you when I find the specific location of those two idiots. After saying that, he slipped to the side and sat down cross-legged. He closed his eyes, and a bluish-white aura slowly flowed around his body. Yin Nuashing and Lan Shiner looked at each other and spread their hands. It seemed that they could look forward to this trip to the realm of ultimate plane. Chapter 1026. Boom! In the empty forest, a huge figure that was at least 100 feet in size suddenly swept past. It was like a small mountain that had collapsed. It crashed into a part of the forest and finally smashed into the ground. The earth trembled and rumbled as if there was an earthquake. At the end of the open path in the forest, a figure slowly appeared. His colorful hair was fluttering in the wind. It was Yin Nuashing. The star pearl between his eyebrows was shining brightly, and there were 6 colorful wings on his back. What was different from usual was that there were many patterns on his face. He had a wild look to him, which added a different charm to his already beautiful face. Lan Xen poked her head out from behind him. Mei Mao blinked. At this time, there were some changes in her lively eyes. Her pupils had become vertical slits, and the black slits in her eyes would shrink and open. Even the color of her eyeballs had been dyed a light purple, which was very demonic. She popped out to take a look. Then she stretched out her jade-like legs and kicked the mountain-like body. She found that it was completely dead, and even its breath of life was fading. Then, she stretched out her jade-like hands with satisfaction. The power of space surged, and she grabbed the gigantic demonic beast and walked back. When the white meatball on Yin Nuashing's head saw this, it jumped down from his head excitedly. It bounced on Lan Xin's head and then landed on the body of the gigantic demonic beast. After bouncing a few times, it turned around and looked at them with joy. Its sparkling little eyes were filled with unconcealable joy. It even cried out happily at them, and its tail, which had a flower hanging from it, wagged quickly. Lan Xen couldn't help but laugh. She hugged Little Magic and rubbed it. Yin Nuashing spread his hands helplessly. They didn't plan to come down here to do anything. Little Magic suddenly felt hungry and wanted to eat something. Moreover, he wanted to eat meat. So, he couldn't help but stop. He randomly caught a Divine Sun-level demonic beast that looked like it had good meat and slapped it to death. Yin Nuashing snapped her fingers and precisely controlled the energy. She skinned the huge magic beast, drained its blood, and set it on fire. The entire process was smooth and didn't take any time. Lan Xen stood beside the stream and looked at herself in the mirror. Her jade-like hands touched her slightly purple eyes, which were full of charm. After a while, she jumped to Yin Nuashing's side and asked, Brother Nuashing, is it really necessary to disguise yourself? Yin Nuashing moved her hands, and in a short while, the huge mountain of meat was divided into dozens of pieces. She put them on a rack and started to barbecue them with the divine flame. Now that she had time, she nodded and said, After all, the ultimate plane region is the territory of the demonic beasts and the demon race. The human race has a main city here. It's said that the two races coexist, but it's the most chaotic of all the main cities in the region. The other cities, such as the Lingwu City in the Kuan-Yuan region, the Heavenly Fate City in the Gan-Yuan region, and the Xingming City in the Taiyuan region, are not as chaotic as the City of Beasts in the Ultimate Plane region. The demonic beasts and the demonic beasts were the same kind, but their evolutionary branches were not exactly the same. So, they were divided into two races. In fact, when the demonic beasts and the demonic beasts both took human form, it was not clear whether they were demonic beasts or demonic beasts. So, they were called the demon race. The demonic beasts refer to those who couldn't and didn't choose to take human form. Little Star doesn't like trouble, so it's better for you to disguise yourselves as the demon race. That's enough. Also disguise your breath. As long as you don't use your full strength, you won't be exposed. Little White used her hand as a knife to cut off a piece of meat. The meat was cooked on the surface, but there was still a piece of red inside. She opened her mouth and took a bite, muttering. Lonxiner nodded. Basically, she wouldn't encounter a situation where she had to use her full strength. Actually, this was only referring to her. Yin Nuoshing had a soul contract with Little White and Yin Nuoshing, so it was not a problem for her to disguise her breath completely as a demonic beast. However, she was a pure human. With the help of Little White and Yin Nuoshing, she could only disguise herself as a demonic beast. But if it wasn't necessary, she probably wouldn't use her Emperor of the Netherworld level power. That's right. The Emperor of the Netherworld level could only be accurately measured after one's body was restored. In the past, when one was just a soul, it was impossible to accurately identify one's current level. Although Yin Nuoshing was a little surprised, she wasn't too shocked. This was the result of her soul being sealed in the mysterious crystal for more than 90 years. This result could be said to be quite small and slow. When Yin Nuoshing and the others cultivated to the later divine level, it was only a matter of 100 million years. After that, they struggled for more than 2 eras before they became divine-level existences. But he also felt gratified. At least this girl had a new body, and there weren't any sequelae. Even if he didn't have that incomplete scroll, he now had many ways to help her restore her body. Perhaps the effect would be better. Dawn! A violent tremor came from the end of the world. There was a powerful explosion of energy, which made Lon Exen turn her head. Her small mouth gently bit off a piece of cooked meat. She blinked at Mei Mao and said, "It seems like someone is fighting." "There is a demon aura." Little White held the barbecued meat and buried her head in her mouth. She didn't even raise her head as she said this. Yin Nuoshing's eyes lit up. She glanced at the other side and saw a fleet of flying ships hurrying away. Behind the fleet, there was an unusually violent explosion of energy. It was 2 people fighting, demons. The billowing demon aura couldn't be emitted by human cultivators. However, it was extremely easy to see experts of the demon clan fighting in the ultimate plane region. These 2 long-lived guys. It's not easy for me to come out on a ship. I'm so angry that I can't believe I met these 2 devils. Speed up. Mother Faster's Cur. Get rid of those 2 devils and don't look back. This is 8 lifetimes of bad luck. I can't believe I saw 2 young supreme masters of the ultimate plane region fighting in this place. I'll be involved in it. Curses came from a fleet that was fleeing in embarrassment. The flying ships that were lagging behind had different degrees of damage. They were all affected by the aftermath of the explosion of energy from the fight between the 2. Not many demonic beasts of the demon clan could master the power of elements. Their body structure and soul structure were different from that of the human clan. The human clan was known as the wisest of all creatures, and they could use everything in the world. However, the experts of the demon clan could only use their own strength. There were pros and cons in the fight between the 2 of them. The energy fluctuations in the sky were the aftermath of the fight between the 2 kings of the ultimate plane region. One of them saw that the damaged ships were still moving slowly, even though they tried their best to accelerate. He shouted coldly, "Why aren't you leaving? Do you want to stay and wait for me to kill you?" The people on the ships were furious. "Mother Cur, you 2 lunatics destroyed their ships, and now you're complaining that they can't move? You broke their legs and you want to run? You're not even allowed to watch the fight. You're really overbearing." A demonic shadow appeared behind the other person. He looked like a human and didn't have any characteristics of the demon clan. His long black hair danced in the wind, and a violent demonic aura was released between heaven and earth. His majestic body brought an unparalleled sense of oppression to the space. He was like a demon king. He was a young king, and his aura was incomparably powerful. Wei Chongting, you're getting more and more out of life. Can you feel any satisfaction from giving orders to some ants? He spat out a blazing breath, and powerful runes appeared all over his body, filling his body with extremely tyrannical explosive power. His fist, which was the size of a cattail hassock, could probably pierce through space with one punch. Bah! The man called Wei Chongting spat out a mouthful of blood and said coldly, "The weak are prey to the strong. This has always been the case. Ants dare to watch a fight between gods. Who gave them the right?" Clang! The two of them punched and kicked each other. Their bodies danced and left afterimages. The explosive shock waves shook the space, and a trace of pitch-black cracks tore open in the space. The former was at a disadvantage after dozens of collisions in an instant. At this time, he was slapped thousands of feet away. "Ruegu, you haven't made any progress after all these years. You've really disappointed me," Wei Chongting shouted coldly. He stepped out thousands of feet and chased after him. Yin Nuoxing calmly retracted his gaze. He no longer needed the eye of the ocean that was glowing with blue light. In his line of sight, he could already see the figures of the two people who were fighting getting closer and closer. Every time they collided, a violent whirlwind of energy would blow up from the ground, breaking the surrounding trees. They seemed to be coming. Lan Xener licked her red lips and stretched her neck to secretly take a bite of the barbecued meat in Yin Nuoxing's hand. Yin Nuoxing glanced at her and nodded. She didn't say anything, indicating that she didn't need to pay attention to them. Ruegu's figure forcibly stopped in midair. With a roar, layers of fist and palm prints exploded out. Under the attack, Wei Chongting roared, his face flushed red. He fiercely punched out, and a wave of demonic aura was condensed into an air cannon that was 100 feet in size. It crushed through the space in front of him, smashing through the layers of fist prints. Wei Chongting's figure suddenly stiffened. He looked down and found that a few people were leisurely eating barbecued meat. They didn't even look at them, as if they didn't care about their fight at all. He suddenly sneered and said, "Irrelevant people, I'll give you 10 seconds to evacuate. Otherwise, I'll kill you." Yin Nuoxing, Lan Xener, and Little White looked at each other and shook their heads helplessly. This king of a younger generation of the ultimate plain region was too arrogant. They were just sitting here eating meat, and he could even implicate them. "You guys can continue fighting. It won't affect us. Don't worry." Yin Nuoxing smiled and waved his hand. It wasn't that he didn't understand the meaning behind Wei Chongting's words, but he was too lazy to pay attention. A mere demigod can't understand human language. Wei Chongting roared angrily. He clenched his fists so hard that creaking sounds could be heard. "I told you to leave. No spectators are allowed in this fight." Ruegu swooped down and landed in front of him. He shook his numb hands and said with a faint smile, "Wei Chongting, you're really living without dignity. You actually have to rely on bullying the weak to show your existence." When Yin Nuoxing and the others heard this, they couldn't help but frown. These words were even more impolite than what he said before. They just didn't know if this guy had a loose tongue or if he didn't mean it. The people of the goblin race, because of their valiant customs, the strong would wantonly trample on the weak. This kind of thing was too common. This kind of drama was played out every day in the realm of the gods. It was just that it was a lot more exaggerated here. Yin Nuoxing slowly bit off a piece of meat and sucked the shredded meat into his mouth. He used a silk handkerchief to wipe the glistening oil on his hands, then said indifferently, "If you guys want to fight, then fight. What does it have to do with us? We're only eating meat here. We're not obstructing you." Good. Wei Chongting was so angry that he laughed and said, "Then you guys can stay here today. I can't be bothered with your fight, but if you guys want to fight, then don't blame me for being too heavy-handed." Yin Nuoxing glanced at Wei Chongting, who was waving his hands, and said indifferently, "Arrogant." Wei Chongting was furious. He glared at him and clenched his fist. A black light burst out from the space and slashed toward Yin Nuoxing's forehead. In the space, it suddenly turned into a huge black hand that was 300 meters in size and pressed down. Rue Gu, who was at the side, didn't stop him. He only looked at this scene with ridicule. There were very few people who dared to speak to them like this. It was really a little interesting. And what was even more interesting was yet to come. That huge black hand gradually enlarged in Yin Nuoxing's eyes. In almost a flash, it appeared 10 meters in front of him, as if it was covering the sky and covering the earth. However, to him, this speed was like slow motion in his eyes. He calmly stretched out his right hand and fiercely blasted out a palm. Boom! The huge black hand was easily shattered by an even more terrifying force. The two forces just happened to be annihilated at the same time and dissipated in midair. Rue Gu was surprised. This person was a little interesting. Wei Chongting was slightly startled. Then he narrowed his eyes. Black demon aura arose from behind him and gradually revealed a huge beast shadow. It seemed to be his original form. It was blurry and couldn't be seen clearly. It let out a sharp sound wave at Yin Nuoxing and the others, shaking the space. The original form of the demon clan was a taboo. When fighting, unless it was necessary, they basically wouldn't reveal their true form. It was easy for others to see through their moves. Some ocean blue color surged in Yin Nuoxing's eyes again. He glanced at Wei Chongting and murmured in a low voice, "Imperial Blood Phoenix Bell, little bird." Wei Chongting's eyes trembled, and he turned pale with fright. He didn't expect that his original form would be seen through a glance. Rue Gu also turned his gaze in surprise. Then, he looked at Yin Nuoxing solemnly and couldn't help but take a step back. This guy was very dangerous, but why hadn't he heard of this person before? It was impossible for someone who could easily see through the original form of others to be unknown. "You're courting death." Wei Chongting roared angrily. Their clan had the inheritance of the phoenix blood. It was very weak, but it was firmly preserved. In the demon clan, once one was tainted with the bloodline of the four gods, their status would become very honorable. Their strength was also very powerful. Their phoenix bellbirds were the best among them. There were many talents, and no one had ever called them little birds. Myriad phoenix blood howl. All the blood in Wei Chongting's body was boiling. The illusory shadow behind him became extremely solid. Since he had already been exposed, there was no need to hide anymore. It was a huge blood-red bird that was at least 10,000 feet in size. The feathers on the edge of its wings were a bit reddish-pink. Its eyes, which were as large as copper bells, were filled with a cold, murderous aura, causing the temperature of the space to drop a lot. Seeing this, Rue Gu had a bad feeling and hurriedly retreated tens of thousands of feet. Screech! A sharp screech filled with blood energy sounded. The space began to tremble and distort violently. A sound wave streaked across the space, and the space was stacked together like waves at a speed visible to the naked eye. Then it was crushed. A huge energy pit exploded in the mountain forest below. The power of the blood energy shockwave was gradually increasing along the way. This guy's become stronger again. Rue Gu's expression was slightly shocked. Soundwave-type moves were extremely fatal. It would cause the energy in other people's bodies to resonate and trigger an explosion. It would injure oneself from the inside out. If it was light, one would be seriously injured. If it was serious, it would not be impossible for one to directly die. Even if one was strong enough to withstand this kind of profound skill, they would have to divert their attention to suppress the energy that was forcefully resonated with, thus diverting their attention. If he fainted from the shock, then the battle would be over. The little bird's cry is quite loud. Unfortunately, its voice is too unpleasant to listen to. Yin Nuoxing shook her head and said indifferently, "It's just a fake phoenix bloodline that you stole from the four gods of heaven and earth. You guys think too highly of yourselves." She shook her head with a soundless smile. It did not matter if it was the demon race or the demonic beasts in this world. Those who claimed to possess the bloodline of the four gods were not the true bloodline of the four gods. They were merely lucky enough to obtain a fragment of the four gods' law imprint in the four gods' law of heaven and earth. They fused it into their blood and turned it into a special bloodline. Those phoenixes, the descendants of the Azure Dragon, and so on, were all obtained this way. They did not possess the pure bloodline of the four gods. But even so, those who possessed this bloodline of the four gods were more than 10 times stronger than ordinary bloodlines. They were not on the same level. Yin Nuashing stretched out her hand and softly shouted, "Quiet!" Extremely suddenly, that crazily spreading blood-colored shockwave stopped abruptly. In an instant, it was as if ice and snow had melted, leaving not a single trace behind. The destroyed mountain forest and the signs of trees shattering and flying also stiffly stopped. It was as if time had stopped at this moment, and then something was erased. Crack! That huge demonic beast shadow was suddenly filled with thick cracks. The flapping wings of the huge demonic beast abruptly stopped. In the next moment, it shattered into thousands of fragments. Those fragments instantly dissipated into thousands of wisps of black fog and dissipated into the air. Pucci, with the demonic beast's true body shattered, Wei Chongting's face became incomparably pale. He could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood from his mouth. His aura was extremely weak. Now, even flying in the air was difficult for him. His figure staggered as he floated down from the sky. He half-knelt on the ground, his entire body convulsing incessantly. Wei Chongting was horrified. Even the other young supreme beings of this generation were unable to break his demonic beast shadow in one strike. That was the unique talent of the demon race experts. The shadow of the demonic beast's true body that was transformed had the same strength as the original body. It was equivalent to the original body. When combined with the human form, it could unleash twice the strength. He had never experienced being instantly killed after using the demonic beast shadow. Yin Nuashing took a bite of the barbecued meat. The oil glistened between her lips and teeth as she chewed. Her colorful eyes looked maliciously at Wei Chongting, who was half kneeling on the ground. The latter's hair stood on end. He dragged his heavily injured body and hurriedly retreated a distance. Why did he feel that the gaze was sizing up his body, which weighed a few 100 kilograms? "You look." Yin Nuashing licked her lips, revealing a row of sparkling pearl-white teeth. "Very delicious." Wei Chongting turned pale with fright. His entire body turned transparent. He screamed in horror and retreated backward desperately. "Pervert! I'm not playing anymore." Rue Gu also shuddered and retreated continuously. Yin Nuashing glanced over. He was so frightened that he almost peed his pants. He retreated in a panic and almost crashed into a tree. What a pity. What a good ingredient. Yin Nuashing licked her lips. This ultimate plain region was heaven for foodies. As long as they had the strength, they could eat delicacies every day. The two who had not gone too far were really scared to the point of peeing their pants when they heard this. They did not bother to say anything and ran wildly, afraid that they would be roasted and eaten if they stayed here. Chapter 10:27. After the two demons disappeared from sight, Yin Nuashing gracefully wiped the oil from the corner of her mouth, tore off a piece of roasted meat, and took a small bite. I didn't expect to see two demons on the supreme leaderboard as soon as I arrived at the ultimate plane region. Moreover, they seem to be supreme beings of a generation. They are at the same level as the Emperor of War of Kuan Yuan, the Divine King. Lan Xian nodded silently. Mei Mao glanced at him and asked, "Did you hide Xian and the others?" "Oh, I hid them well," Yin Nuashing replied with a smile and pointed at her temple. "I hid them all here." This time, they had other things to do in the ultimate plane region. Unlike when they were in the Ganyuan region, where they could stay thousands of miles above the ground with the Fire Phoenix, he was only going down to fix the Pillar of Creation and the Guardian Formation. This time, he might have to work a little longer, and he felt that it was safer to carry them with him. So he stuffed them into his spiritual world. After all, the group of girls used his spiritual world as a place to sleep. Xian and the others were also in seclusion, and they lacked a peaceful environment. The area in his spiritual world was absolutely quiet, unless something happened that alarmed the chaos. So, did anything happen to that unreliable, white-haired guy? Yin Nuoxing yawned and glanced at Whitey, who was chewing. Whitey's face stiffened, and a drop of cold sweat fell from its forehead. It looked away guiltily, and the movement of its mouth slowed down a little. All right, I didn't discover anything. Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but sigh when he saw this. He couldn't discover it, even if it was hidden in the realm of the gods. In that case, even if he came to the ultimate plane region and was slightly closer to it, there wouldn't be too strong of a reaction. He could vaguely feel the position of the west, which was actually pretty good. Not bad, my foot. They were now in the easternmost part of the ultimate plane region, and the west was the entire ultimate plane region. There was not much difference between having a little reaction, right? Crunch. Yin Nuoxing crushed a bone, and the cracking sound made Little Magic's hair shiver. He carefully turned his head, and when he saw that Yin Nuoxing did not do anything, he breathed a sigh of relief, and then calmly moved back a little. Cough, cough about that. That idiot housekeeper really likes to play hide and seek. Isn't it normal to not be able to find her? Seeing Yin Nuoxing's smiling face, Little White couldn't help but shiver and laugh dryly. Actually, if the two of them were really hiding in the ultimate plane region, that place would probably become a place where demonic beasts wouldn't dare to stay. The bloodline of the four gods has an absolute suppressive effect on the demonic beasts, so not many demonic beasts and demonic beasts would go near that place. It's also possible that they would become a guardian deity, attracting the attention of many demonic beasts. Be gentler. Whitey put the meat aside dejectedly and sat down obediently. Yin Nuoxing pinched his cheeks fiercely. You used a bunch of my high-level diagrams and borrowed the Book of Epics, and now you can't even find those two sleeping fellows. This guy used at least 10 divine-grade diagrams. Even if he had a lot of them, he shouldn't have squandered them like this, right? If he used them all up, he would not be able to produce more. He even swore that he would definitely find them. But 3 or 4 days had passed, and he did not find anything. And in short, it hurts. Whitey was furious. Yin Nuoxing saw this, and her cheeks trembled, and she let him go. She sighed and rubbed her cheeks, and hurriedly said, if the two of them are really sleeping in the ultimate plane region, it will be very easy to find them. It's just like the forbidden areas in the realm of the gods. If the two of them are really in the ultimate plane region, it will be like a forbidden area. Are you saying that they can't enter no matter what? Yin Nuoxing glanced at him. Whitey, if they really exist, they will be very conspicuous, and everyone will know. No, all beasts will know. Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath. In the end, they came to the ultimate plane region to look for forbidden areas. He knew of 2 or 3 forbidden areas in the ultimate plane region. One of them existed in the ancient era, and 2 of them were known in this era. One of them was very vague, and the description was ambiguous. He did not even know if it existed. Burial ground of heaven, Beast King's abyss, or Godfall sky. Tell me one, and I will arrange it. Yin Nuoxing stroked her long hair and said, Godfall sky has been destroyed. That was originally the hiding place of the 4 divine beasts. It was the hiding place of the 4 divine beasts when we were young, and it was a place of quiet recuperation, a place of cultivation. That's why the Azure Dragon and the others should not be there. Whitey mumbled, Destroyed? What do you mean by destroyed? Wasn't it still fine in the ancient era? Yin Nuoxing was a little surprised. This was the forbidden area of the ultimate plane region that he knew of in the ancient era. He did not expect to hear about it again after so many years, and it was already destroyed. Moreover, it was the place where the 4 divine beasts cultivated when they were young. It was no wonder that Whitey did not hide in its infancy and directly walked on the earth. In the past, when the 4 divine beasts were born, they were basically mature. This referred to the maturity of their form. They had completely transformed into human form and did not leak the slightest bit of divine beast aura. It did not refer to their cultivation. When their cultivation reached the initial deity realm, they were considered to have reached the initial deity realm. Being able to completely transform into human form and conceal their aura meant that they were mature in form. However, back then, the phoenix was an egg hiding in that dark place, and Whitey was hiding in the divine Tiger Mountain Villa. At this time, he still had many characteristics of the white tiger on his body and could not completely conceal them. He did not know what happened to these two fellows in their previous life. The end of every life for us four divine beasts is due to a great disaster. We will not run out of lifespan. When we die, we will return to the godfall sky to recuperate until we reappear one day. These are all memories that originate from the bloodline. As for the other memories, unless we are completely dead, the memories of that life will be preserved. Even if we are completely dead, we will leave behind a wisp of our soul to return to the godfall sky. We will need to recuperate for a very long time before we can reappear, Whitey said. Then in this life of yours, because the godfall sky was destroyed, you were recuperating in the forest outside the divine Tiger Mountain Villa? Yin Nuashing recalled the first time they met. Whitey was silent for a while, then said, "After we parted ways with you Ing in our previous life, the three of us were sealed by him. We were anxious to go out and see what happened, but we couldn't find a way to break his seal. We were also unwilling to wait for 100 or 200 years, so we accidentally tortured ourselves to the point where we needed to be exiled to slowly recover. You can just treat it as us torturing ourselves to death, and then we each found a place to recuperate. Because we were not completely dead, the memories of that life were still preserved, so we could still recognize you after 3 eras. While we were waiting for our resurrection, we also felt that the contract between us had disappeared. That bastard had used the revolving heaven samsara to enter the cycle of reincarnation, and we also went completely silent. You can probably guess what happened after that. We just woke up in that mountain 5 or 6 years before we met you. Saying that it was the previous life was just to make it easier to differentiate. In reality, they did not die in the life when they followed Feng Yuing. Yes, they had completely died in their previous life, and when they revived again, it was a cycle of reincarnation. After a lifetime, their cycle of reincarnation was different from that of others, as they would only revive in the realm of the gods. By the way, other than the memories of our previous life, we only have the memories of our bloodline left. We speculate that it was completely destroyed once in the previous life, and all the memories of the past no longer exist. Whitey spread out his hands. When was the godfall sky destroyed? Yin Nuashing narrowed his eyes. I don't know. When I reacted, the place where I lived had already been destroyed. In my previous life, I did not come out from the godfall sky. Whitey shook his head blankly. The beginning of his memories was not in the godfall sky. The special rules of the godfall sky, as well as the special energy that was left there, circled around and divided a huge area, forming a special natural formation. It was very powerful, and people who were not gods could not enter it. If you want to destroy it, you would need the power of a god, so it might be something that happened in the previous era. Whitey spread his hands. The number of gods in this era was so small that it was negligible. There were only 3 of them, and there were no records of which 3 were left behind. Only the declaration of the gods told the world that there were 3 gods in the realm of the gods. Other than that, there was no other news. Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes and sighed. No matter what, we should find a chance to go to the godfall sky and take a look. Whitey shrugged. Up to you. That place has become the most ordinary place. The energy has been completely annihilated. I went back to take a look in my previous life. A few days later, Yin Nuashing and the others walked on the land of the ultimate plain region. It was a land of mountains, and each of the 4 regions of the divine prefecture was about the same size as the original region. The southern region was mostly flat, and there were very few forests and deserts. It was evergreen all year round. The ultimate plain region and the East Sea were heaven for demon beasts and demonic beasts. The latter was full of water. Only the ultimate plain region had mountains that stretched for tens of thousands of miles, hundreds of thousands of miles, or even millions of miles. It was magnificent, with cliffs, springs, and waterfalls. In the forest, Ancient trees stood tall, and celestial beasts were faintly discernible. Fortunately, we have Sister Phone, and Whitey's auras, which saved us a lot of trouble. Lon Xin, wave her hand. Looking at the giant beasts that were hundreds of feet long and thousands of feet long, she couldn't help but shake her head. The auras of the phoenix and the white tiger were too frightening. As soon as they got close, the entire forest was frightened. Yun Nuashing shook the oil paper umbrella in his hand and stretched out his hand. Under the sunlight, his arm was as white as jade and as white as ice crystals. When the oil paper umbrella in his hand was taken, he turned his gaze and saw Lan Exen sticking out her tongue at him with a smile. She held the oil paper umbrella with both hands and kept spinning it above them. This place is a little interesting. When they arrived in front of the forest, Yin Nuashing narrowed his eyes. They didn't go in, but they felt that there was something in front of them. Well, there are hundreds of beasts running rampant in this place, but there is a place that has never been touched. Whitey also narrowed his eyes. There seems to be something in there. Do you want to take a look? Before Yin Nuashing had time to hesitate, Whitey patted his waist and said, "Don't worry, the phoenix and I are here. As long as it is related to the demonic beasts, we can take care of everything." I didn't say that I wouldn't go. Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes and waved his hand. He smiled at Lan Xiner and said, "Sister, let's go and take a look." Lan Xiner kept her oil paper umbrella and smiled as she held his arm and walked into the forest together. Yin Nuashing and the others were very fast. They flew in the air in the forest. Whitey glanced at the ground and then narrowed his eyes to look at the ground. This place is intertwined with the dragon veins. All kinds of source energies are very active, and it is abnormally strong. The power of the rules is faintly showing signs of being sealed. Once it is sealed, the rules here will be completely different from the rules in the outside world. Whitey looked left and right for a while. Then he pointed at a place and said, "Go that way." Yin Nuashing nodded and immediately turned around. After going around the overlapping forest, he suddenly felt that the light around him had dimmed. He narrowed his eyes and felt that the energy around him was a little abnormal. "Woo-woo," little Huan suddenly called out, causing Yun Nuashing to be startled. This little fellow suddenly jumped up and down on his head, mumbling some unknown syllables, causing him to be confused. He did not know how to speak beast language. Whitey listened for a while and said, "Woo-woo." He said that he felt the blood of a divine beast flowing here. When Yin Nuashing heard this, he narrowed his eyes and looked around like Whitey. The trees and mountains covered the sky and blocked many things. No demonic beasts dared to enter this place. The air was cold, and there was nothing. Boom, boom. All of a sudden, an extremely terrifying aura came from all directions and covered this huge mountain forest. Yin Nuashing and the others were shocked. A white and black mist suddenly emerged from a mountain range that was hundreds of thousands of feet tall. There was a strange energy pervading this place. Suddenly, a heavy downpour came from the sky and caught them off guard. Yin Nuashing quickly put up an energy barrier. He felt that there was something wrong with this smell. There was a fishy smell. Whitey shook off the rainwater on his body and wiped his face. He was astonished and said, "Blood rain?" Yin Nuashing narrowed his eyes. Divine flames ignited around his body and burned away all the blood rain on his body. He raised his head and saw the dense blood rain falling from the sky and dripping onto the energy barrier. The scene in front of him was extremely terrifying. After going over a huge mountain, what appeared in front of them was a spacious area. There were a few hundreds of thousands of feet tall skeletons entangled together, forming a deathly white bone mountain. The blood rain fell from the sky onto the bone mountain and dripped onto the ground. However, it turned into little drops of golden red liquid. Those are the corpses of sacred beasts. Much of their energy was taken away by the blood rain. The energy contained in the god's corpse was washed away into the soil. Whitey's eyes flashed with radiance as he took a deep breath. Boom! Yin Nuashing had a premonition in advance. He quickly carried Lan Xian and retreated a few hundred feet. In front of them, a blood pillar that was thousands of feet wide suddenly burst out. That energy was tainted with an ominous aura. Whitey was so frightened that he couldn't help but shout, "What the F asterisk CK?" After that, the few of them saw the blood pillar disappear. The ground far away cracked open. They were dozens of feet wide, but they didn't know how long they were. Those cracks came from afar and gradually became a huge fissure. It was like an abyss. The ground around them exploded with blood pillars like fountains. However, it wasn't water that was spurting out, but blood. There were even 1 or 2 golden fountains. It was extremely terrifying. Boom, boom, boom. The huge crack that came from afar expanded to a size of 100,000 feet, like a deep abyss, swallowing the entire mountain range in one gulp. The mountain of bones that were piled up from the sacred beast corpses also fell into the abyss with a rumble. Yin Nuo Xing and the others lowered their heads to look and saw a huge river of blood surging in the abyss. They did not know where it came from, and in the river of blood, there was something floating up and down. It was a round thing. Its size was hard to say, but it seemed to be an egg. Egg. Yin Nuo Xing scratched his head and looked at Whitey. "Do you know what it is?" "Who knows?" Whitey shook his head. There were so many demonic beasts in the world. Even if the 4 sacred beasts were the kings of the kings, it was impossible for them to know all the races. After a moment, he squinted his eyes. There was a terrifying radiance in his eyes. There are at least 100,000 different auras surging in the blood river. The blood sacrifice of 100,000 demonic beasts. Among them, there are many corpses buried deep in the ground. Just like those sacred beast corpses, they were all swallowed by the blood river. The egg at the bottom of the blood river. All the blood was used to nourish that egg. "I know." Yin Nuo Xing nodded his head. He was not too surprised. He had seen crueler things. It was just the blood sacrifice of 100,000 demonic beasts. There was nothing to be afraid of. Rumble. A huge mountain in front of them collapsed. The sky was filled with emerald green particles that escaped in all directions. The sky was covered by dark clouds. The gloomy sky was filled with rumbling sounds. From afar, there was a loud cracking sound. A valley collapsed. Countless rocks rolled down from the cliff. In an instant, the valley was flattened. Lightning struck from the sky and wreaked havoc on the ground. Yin Nuo Xing squinted his eyes and raised his head. The dark clouds dispersed. He saw the Milky Way collapsing and the stars exploding. He immediately understood what was going on. He hugged Lon Xen with one hand and carried Whitey with the other. He said, "Let's retreat. There's an old man here who is about to die." Before Lon Xin could react, Yin Nuo Xing had already moved. The light particles wrapped around the few of them and rushed into the distance. The rules and divine power of a dying god are leaking out and spreading into the sky. It is a terrible scene. It is nothing. We just need to avoid it. Yin Nuo Xing said faintly. All the terrible things in the world had their origins. The unknown always made people feel afraid. However, when he found out about this, he was no longer surprised. At most, he would sigh that a god was about to pass away. It will not be able to hold on for much longer. It is about to pass away here. The god who is still in control of himself will either choose to turn this body into a relic and leave behind many things for future generations. Otherwise, he will dissipate into the purest energy in the world and enter the cycle of reincarnation. Yin Nuo Xing glanced behind him. The terrible scene had not spread. The god probably could not control himself anymore. When a god is about to die, he will turn into a black hole and destroy everything around him. The range of the impact will be very large. We are lucky to be at the edge. The moment he finished speaking, in the distance, a bright light pierced through the sky and illuminated the whole world. The light seemed to be eternal. Yin Nuo Xing could not help but widen his eyes. Chapter 1028. An extremely brilliant beam of light pierced through the heavens like a divine light that could split the heavens and earth. It illuminated the entire world and in that instant, the light was brighter than the explosion of 1,000 suns. When Yin Nuoxing turned around, he was almost blinded. The entire sky was illuminated by the golden light, and the river of blood below was illuminated by the golden light. It was as if ice and snow had met the warm sun. Gradually, the river of blood started to dissipate and calm down. It was disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. What the F***CK? Yin Nuoxing's eyes were pierced by the golden light, and he hurriedly turned his gaze away. He let out a sorrowful cry. That golden light was so brilliant that his phoenix eyes were about to be blinded. That vision, that situation, that power. Yin Nuoxing's heart was beating like a drum. The golden light had illuminated the entire world in white, and he felt as if he was going to be blinded when he looked ahead with his back to the light. Boundless power of rules and divine power were spreading wildly, in a surge of divine power that could cause the heavens and earth to go out of control. The order of this world was falling toward the sea of light behind him. It was as if there was a black hole of order that was collapsing and destroying the rules and order of this world. Oh no, curiosity is going to spoil things again. Yin Nuoxing shouted. He waved his hand, and the light elements on his body poured out crazily. He carried Lan Xian, and Little White and fled for their lives. The 6 wings on his back expanded to a size of several hundred feet, and even his 5 divine halos rushed out. Strands of strange energy enveloped them, but this special energy was like the light of a firefly compared to the light of the moon. Stars, long river of light years. Yin Nuoxing shouted. The power of the stars on his body condensed and twisted into a huge starry whirlpool that appeared behind him. That huge whirlpool was large enough to swallow them whole. Starlight gathered crazily in the whirlpool, and a starry path that was only a few feet wide appeared in front of them. Specks of starlight filled the air, and stars appeared. However, this scene couldn't be seen because their eyes were about to be blinded by the golden light behind them. Boom! The moment the Starlight Avenue was formed, Yin Nuoxing and the others disappeared. The vortex in the starry sky closed, and the Starlight Avenue disappeared. At the same time, the golden pillar of light expanded to a width of 100,000 miles. The golden pillar of light illuminated half the sky of the divine realm in gold. This vast phenomenon was observed by countless people, including those from the Divine Land and the Ganyuan territory. The moment the pillar of light reached its limit, it exploded with a loud bang and disappeared. The remaining golden light and particles scattered into the sky and fell from the sky. Its center was like a golden fountain, spewing out the last wisps of golden aura and particles before completely disappearing. However, the golden light that filled the sky did not dissipate for a long time. The golden particles scattered in the air had lost all their divinity and were of no use. It was incomparably magnificent. Those who knew it could only sigh. Something was missing in this world again. Buzz! The moment the golden pillar of light dissipated, a golden halo exploded 100,000 feet above the ground and spread across the entire realm of the gods. In just an instant, it spread across the entire realm of the gods and the world where the realm of the gods was located. Even the void trembled because of the golden halo. The halo carried a loud echo that reverberated in the void for a long time, as if it was saying something to this deserted place. Even in the faraway worlds, there were people who raised their heads in astonishment and looked around in confusion. They seemed to have sensed that something was wrong. Something's mark had disappeared in the void and disappeared. On the Dragon Head Peak, Luli rested her chin on her hand and turned her head in a daze. She looked in the direction where the fluctuation came from. Mei Mao was in a daze. After a long time, she sighed softly. I hope you can enjoy the fruits of Tao in your next life. There were too many people who had fallen on this path. Too many people had unfinished business. Unwillingness, regret, annoyance, and many other emotions filled the reincarnation road and couldn't dissipate. The final words of countless creatures echoed in the reincarnation road. Countless creatures didn't want to go on this path. What could they say? However, in the end, he just wanted to say goodbye. This life had passed. In the next life, would he still be himself? Even if he was no longer himself, he still hoped that it would be able to resolve the regrets of this life. He could only pray like this. Wow, the commotion is really big. In the distance, Yin Nuashing and the others appeared. They had turned back from an even farther place. The scale of the energy overflow here was huge. It was impossible to hide such a big commotion. They were afraid that people or monsters would come here soon. Yin Nuashing looked in front of her. In the place where the pure divinity had eroded the big hole, the rules no longer existed. There should be strange phenomena, but because of the divinity, the place still maintained a delicate balance. There were no loopholes in the rules. Brother Nuashing, did a god just pass away? Lan Xian blinked at Mei Mao. She couldn't help but ask. Yin Nuashing sighed and shook her head. No, it was a god. Lan Xian and Little White trembled. A god? A god of this era? Or a god from the ancient era? According to the records in the history books, the number of gods decreased from the ancient era and went into hibernation. Actually, there wasn't such a later period. The number of gods decreased. Since the mythological era became a legend, the number of gods has been decreasing. It's just that the relative number is very large. Even if the number was reduced by multiples, it took 6 eras to reduce the number to what it is now. In the entire divine realm, only 3 gods have appeared, and all the gods have gone into hibernation. Yin Nuashing narrowed his eyes. He had the Book of Epochs, which allowed him to observe certain matters in the god realm. Coupled with the Pillar of Creation, even though he couldn't know everything in the world with a single glance, he could still track down the high-level existences who had once appeared in this world. The birth of these existences had a huge influence, and the imprints they left behind in this world would never disappear. Yin Nuashing used these imprints to estimate the number of heavenly gods in various eras in the god realm. As for the heavenly god-level experts from the outer world, they weren't born in the god realm, nor were they promoted in the god realm. Yin Nuashing had no way to verify this. The lifespan of a god is close to infinite. It's not a problem for them to survive 3 or 4 years. Lu Li is still on Mount Wanlong. Yin Nuashing shrugged and said, therefore, there is only one reason for the death of a god. The god had an unmentionable disease that affected the source of his life, causing cracks to appear. His lifespan is no longer infinite. The only thing that can do this is the Great Reincarnation. The Great Reincarnation. At the mention of the Great Reincarnation, Lan Xian and Little White's breathing quickened. This was the world's biggest secret. There were only a handful of people who had personally experienced the Great Reincarnation. It was a power that came from the entire world. Even the deities would be afraid of it, and the gods would not dare to face it head-on. The number of lives that had perished under that power was uncountable. Even the world had become a unit of measurement. Even the deities were very insignificant in front of it. In the end, it's just a speculation. I have never experienced the Great Reincarnation, but some of my memory fragments seem to have scenes of the Great Reincarnation. They are blurry. They are the memory fragments that I left behind during the 70 eras of reincarnation. Its power is absolute and irresistible. Life that is born in the world and cannot jump out of the world can only be trapped and die in the world. In the end, they will perish together with the entire world. The level of the gods on the world stairway is similar to that of the primordial realm. The Great Reincarnation can destroy the entire primordial realm. Therefore, according to this speculation, the Great Reincarnation can threaten the gods and is not a completely indestructible existence. In addition to the one I just saw, I have seen 2 gods who have been affected by the Great Reincarnation. The former is an expert above the gods, but the one in front of me is actually still uncertain, Yin Nuashing muttered. Buzz! The pendant suddenly lit up with a dazzling light, and Yin Nuashing was stunned. The Pillar of Creation sent back a message, and his expression changed slightly. He hurriedly grabbed Lan Xian and Little White and dashed toward the place where the god had fallen. An ancient life is awakening. The pillar of creation received a powerful energy wave. The wave came from the great Ganyuan region? No, this is... His expression suddenly became extremely solemn. Lan Xin, could not help but turn her head. Seeing the solemn expression on his face, she could not help but swallow her saliva. After a few minutes, Yin Nuoxing's expression changed slightly. The wave came from the entire realm of the gods. There are at least 100 super powerful energy waves that are awakening. Among them, there are 5. The energy waves of the 5 targets are still increasing. I estimate that they are at the level of the gods. Little White could not help but gasp. She was furious. There were actually 5 gods at the level of the gods left in this era. Someone's target is probably here. Let's go in and take a look. They are awakening, and it might take some time. Yin Nuoxing increased his speed to the limit. Light particles flickered along the way, and his speed was boundless. In a flash, he had arrived at the place where he saw the light pillar. What was left behind was not a bottomless pit. It was not a bombardment of pure energy. What was washed away by the pure divine energy was what was melted. Those could be classified as dregs. Therefore, it could be understood that what was left behind after the baptism of the divine energy was the essence of the essence. Just like the earth at this moment, it had turned into a brilliant golden color. The energy contained in it was much more than before. Although a large part of the surrounding earth had disappeared, it could also be understood that it had been condensed. Why did the blood river disappear? Could it be that the god evolved it when he was on his deathbed? Little White's vertical pupils contracted slightly. He stared at the abyss below. The abyss was still there, but the blood river below was gone. Yin Nuoxing shook his head. That blood river really exists. It is not an evolution of the remnant energy of the god. Yin Nuoxing used a weak power of rules to cover his body, erasing the traces of them coming here. He looked around, nodded slightly, and rushed into the depths. In a deeper place, he found a place where the light spots had not dissipated in time. The center of the funnel-shaped pit on the ground was still spewing out golden particles like a spring. Obviously, this should be the source of everything. Yin Nuoxing and the others landed. The remnant divinity in this area was very rich, and the rules were still perfect. There is nothing left. Yin Nuoxing sighed and shook his head. After dozens of eras, it has finally become a pile of ashes. Little White frowned and looked around. He could not help but mutter, "It's not like there is nothing left. Come out." He waved his small hand and shouted. From the bottom of the divinity spring, something was squeezed out. It was golden and oval-shaped. An egg. Lan Xiner opened her small mouth. She was a little surprised. After looking at it for a while, she felt that something was not right. Isn't this the blood-colored egg in the blood river just now? Yin Nuoxing looked at it carefully. He was not too sure. On the half-meter-tall egg, there were very beautiful patterns. It looked the same as the egg in the blood river just now. However, the aura was completely different. One had a demonic, bloody smell, but this one had an unconcealable divine aura. Little White held it in his hand, looked at it for a while, and nodded. Yes, it is that one. I can recognize it. Hearing him say so, Yin Nuoxing did not have any doubts. He knew more about the demon beasts. If that's the case, it must have been washed away by the power of divinity. It washed away the filth and turned into this. So what kind of egg is this? You can't recognize it? Little White looked at him in surprise. Yin Nuoxing's eyes twitched. I should be able to recognize it when it was born. However, this is still an egg. I am not the encyclopedia of the demon world. How can I know more than you? Oh. Little White thought about it and felt that it was true. He lowered his head and looked at the half-meter-tall golden egg. He pondered for a while. It is not a dragon or a phoenix. It grew in the water in the beginning, the aura of a divine beast. Are you saying that it is a dragon? Yin Nuoxing asked. It's hard to say. I can't recognize it either. This is a mutated egg, and it is a double mutation. It should have been fine at first. Then it was swept away by the blood river. Or it was deliberately thrown into the blood river to be cultivated. Finally, It was baptized by the power of divinity. I would not be surprised if anything came out of it. After saying that, Little White smiled bitterly and shook his head. Double mutation. He really did not know if it was lucky or unlucky. It had encountered such a drastic change before it came out of the egg. Little White looked at it for a while and threw it to Yinuashing. The latter threw it into the spiritual beast pool to be nurtured. There was still a void spirit dragon's egg there. Many years had passed, but there was no movement at all. Who knew if it could still come back to life? It's almost time to go. Yinuashing said. He put his hands together at the bottom of the funnel and bowed gently. Lan Sheener and Little White followed suit. They paid tribute and gave their blessings. After all, this was once a divine being. Yinuashing had just straightened up when he saw a circular hole that was 10 feet in size at the bottom of the funnel pit. Originally, there was nothing there. It was just a smooth piece of soil and rocks, but now a circular hole had appeared, as if it was connected to someplace. That is, the long yellow river was billowing. It was unknown how long it was and how wide it was. They could not see the source or the end. It was mysterious, as if it came from the sky. Countless tall figures roared and took heavy steps, rolling up the long river. Billions of lives walked in this long river with confused eyes. Their bodies were submerged in the water. They walked step by step in confusion. In the sky, the sun, the moon, and the stars appeared, and countless stars were destroyed. Millions of lives are going to the underworld. Yinuashing's eyes were serious. How could the Nine Netherland appear in this place? It disappeared. Lonexen cried out in surprise. The circular hole quickly disappeared, and what she had seen just now was like an illusion. Yinuashing frowned. After thinking for a while, she shook her head fiercely. Forget it. Now was not the time to think about this. Retreat. He shouted. Starlight shone from his body. His figure suddenly flashed and disappeared. Not even a trace of his aura was left behind. In the blink of an eye, he came to another place. This was the place where the pillars of creation were hidden. In an emergency, he could activate the formation and let the pillars of creation drag him there. However, he could not be sure which pillar of creation would drag him away. The only thing he could be sure of was that at least he would not cross the origin region directly. In addition, it was not impossible for him to be thrown into the origin region where the pillars of creation were hidden. Yinuashing came in front of the pillars of creation again. He waved his hand, and the model of the divine world unfolded again. This time, it was more detailed. When it was unfolded, it was more than 1,000 feet wide. He turned it slightly. The divine world, which was woven by colorful lines, trembled. The energy of heaven and earth was revealed. It was originally invisible and colorless. Unless it was triggered by something, it could not be seen. Unless it was so dense that it condensed into a mist in the space. At this time, on the plate of the divine world, there were many places that lit up. They were not woven by colorful lines, but by other colors. They were as bright as stars. Among them, 5 were extremely bright. They were scattered all over the divine world. Those were the alarmed post-god level experts. Wow, this time the sky is really going to be turned upside down. Whitey was so surprised that it stuck out its tongue. Especially in the extreme plain region and the Ganyuan region, there were 2 huge anomalies in 10 days. They covered the sky and covered the sun. One of the anomalies was even transmitted to every corner of the divine world. It was extremely frightening. Those people were attracted by the fluctuations caused by the death of the divine beings. However, the divine beings are in a state of hibernation. They should not come out. At least, they will not come out for the next 2 years, Yinuashing said in a deep voice. 1,000 years. Lan Xin did not understand. Yinuashing's face was as calm as water. She nodded and said, 1,000 years later, the laws of heaven and earth will be reversed. The great reincarnation at the end of the 139th era will be the ultimate reincarnation. It will be mixed with the laws of heaven and earth that were not completely reversed in the past few eras. It will be an extremely powerful reincarnation. Before that, there will be an eruption of desperation. It will be like a dying struggle. At the last moment, the divine world will burn up all of its power. At that time, the divine world will return to its peak, and the divine beings will emerge like bamboo shoots after the rain. That will be the time when they will truly come out. They are still not used to the current laws of heaven and earth. They were only awakened by the awakened divine being. It will not be long before they become quiet again. The laws of heaven and earth in the divine world are suppressing the divine beings too much. Look, there is no movement in the direction of the ghastly forest in the extreme plain region. Even Lu Li did not move. She should have also suppressed the divine being's origin, Yin Nuoxing said as she pointed at the extreme plain region. However, even if they don't move, they will still send people out. If there are disciples under the divine beings, they will definitely be very powerful, Whitey muttered. Yin Nuoxing pondered for a while, then nodded solemnly. Yes, that's right. The disciples under the divine beings, and even the descendants of the divine beings, would appear. What they saw today was like a huge barrel of explosives. It was the beginning of something that had been detonated in advance. The rotation of the world's roulette was gradually accelerating again. Achoo! Lu Li, who was playing chess with herself, suddenly sneezed loudly, and the chess piece in her hand was shaken to the point that it flew out. Her pretty face was filled with confusion, but after a while, she felt relieved. She could not help but sigh and say, "This silly fish is nagging me again. If you have the ability to nag me, then come and see me." Her gloomy tone was like that of a wife whose husband did not return home all year round, and who is alone in an empty house. Where did he run off to? Didn't I ask him to come and accompany me more often? Why didn't he come and find me after he recovered his memories? Ever since Quarter Moon announced the end of the era, the expression on her face gradually came back to life, as if the ice and snow that had been frozen for 10,000 years had melted. After sighing bitterly for a while, the expression on Lu Li's face returned to normal. She picked up a black chess piece, gently placed it on the table, and murmured, "Divine beings? That's a topic from a long time ago. What's gone is gone after all. Although the flow of time has been sped up in advance, it may not be a bad thing." She put her elbows on the stone table, and her jade-like hands supported her cheeks. Her eyelids were slightly lowered, and her red lips curved into a smile without any warmth. Don't let me find out that you guys have done anything bad. Since you announced the birth of this era out of boredom, then I also have the power to end this era in advance after a while. She sighed again, lying on her side on the stone table in boredom, and murmured, "This is not fun. Brother Moon, when will you come and see me? I miss you too. I have a lot to say." That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.